The internet was humanity's worst mistake. Everything from the tech it's built on to the companies that run the biggest platforms, influencers who have made it their jobs to mislead the public, and of course, artificial intelligence. Without a shadow of a doubt, the internet has done a lot of good for humanity, but perhaps it has done more harm than good, and resulted in a net negative for the world. To understand just how terrible the internet is, we need to start by talking about the foundation on which it's built. The year is 1665, and Isaac Newton is looking out his window at an apple tree standing tall in his orchard in Lincolnshire, England. All of a sudden, a ripe and lonely apple falls from the tree and makes its way to the ground. While most people would consider this a mundane event, Newton followed its trajectory with great interest. What young Isaac didn't know at the time was that this apple would become the most famous piece of fruit in human history, as its natural attraction to the ground would spark a moment of genius, leading him to create the laws of motion that revolutionized modern physics. Newton wasn't conducting an experiment when he discovered the laws of gravity. He wasn't overloading his brain with information trying to figure it out. He was simply looking aimlessly outside his window. He was bored. But that was in the 17th century. Times have changed a lot since then. These days, we hardly ever allow ourselves to just stare out a window or sit in our backyards doing nothing but staring at the sky. We never pause for a moment and just let our minds wander into deep, unexplored territories. Turns out that diving deep into our own thoughts is something that we don't really like to do. We find it boring and will do anything to alleviate boredom, even if it means subjecting ourselves to self-inflicted electric shocks. This, sadly, is not an exaggeration. In a study conducted at the University of Virginia, a social psychologist named Timothy Wilson recruited hundreds of student volunteers to take part in what he called thinking periods. Individuals were placed in small rooms with blank walls and no personal belongings. They were asked to entertain themselves with nothing but their thoughts for just 6 to 15 minutes. When asked to rate their experience afterwards, about 50% of the volunteers did not like being alone with their thoughts, citing it was boring. Then, researchers left the volunteers in the room for another 15 minutes. This time, though, they introduced a button that participants could press to shock themselves if they wanted to. Around 67% of men and 25% of women chose to voluntarily inflict pain on themselves rather than just sit and do nothing. This research suggests that, sadly, a lot of us would rather experience physical pain than sit in our own thoughts. When left with nothing else to do, most of us immediately grab our phones, switching from one app to the other, as the algorithms of the internet feed us with the exact content that'll keep us from being bored. What we fail to realize is that for these algorithms to understand what makes us tick, they take so much of our information. Companies then sell that information, things like your name, phone number, and home address, to data brokers who sell them to other companies. What's worse is that sometimes these data brokers are involved in data breaches, where all the information they have about you is stolen by nefarious actors. In the spring and summer of 1665, an outbreak of bubonic plague spread through London, and by July, had claimed more than 17,000 lives. Almost at once, people throughout the city began fleeing to the countryside, isolating themselves in fear for their lives. Among those who fled was none other than Sir Isaac Newton. Of course, at that time, Newton had not yet been knighted. In fact, he had not yet even witnessed the famous apple falling. Interestingly though, his 2 years spent in isolation, away from the bells, whistles, and distractions of the city, was the time when Newton's genius came to life, and he was able to invent calculus, create the science of motion, and develop a framework for gravity. These 2 years spent in quarantine were Newton's own 15 minutes isolated in a room with nothing to do. Newton, however, didn't seek external stimuli to prevent his mind from wandering. Instead, he welcomed the boredom that often comes with deep thinking, and stared out the window, which has, without a doubt, paid dividends for all of humanity. During this isolation in the countryside, Newton also invented calculus. Throughout his life, he also made major discoveries in optics, proposing that white light is actually a combination of light from all of the color spectrum. Most famously, following his Apple incident, he developed the 3 laws of motion. In all fairness, attributing Newton's greatest accomplishments to him being quarantined in the countryside is a bit misleading. The truth is, the incident of the apple falling wasn't an isolated moment of genius. Newton's various contributions to science were the product of years of hard work and dedication, tediously working towards these moments of revelation. However, it is still helpful to recognize the importance of solitude and boredom in creating that particular eureka moment. According to psychologist Dr. Sandy Mann of the University of Central Lancashire, once we start daydreaming and allow our brains to wander like Newton did when he looked out the window, we start thinking beyond the conscious and into the subconscious, which allows for all sorts of connections to take place. This is called the default mode. When you're bored or performing mundane tasks like doing the dishes or folding the laundry, your body may be on autopilot, but your brain is actually pretty busy. When in the default mode, your mind gets the chance to connect to different ideas, try and solve some of your most pressing problems, and even create personal narratives or set goals. This is why programmers often tell you that they figured out their problem with their code just as they were jumping into bed, ready to get some shut-eye, or why you feel like your best ideas come when you jump in the shower. The problem is that today, those are the very rare moments that we allow ourselves to be bored. Every other time, we almost always choose the electric shock method. Living in a society where we have the entire world of entertainment on our fingertips has led to our immediate dissatisfaction with even seconds of boredom. The more we fill our world with fast-moving, high-intensity stimulation, the more we get used to it, and the less of a tolerance we have for boredom. On average, Americans reach for their phones 344 times a day. That's once every 4 minutes. From quick email checks to diving down the rabbit hole of reels and memes, Americans spend an average of 2 hours and 54 minutes on their phone each day, with some people clocking up to 10 hours a day on their phones. Without a doubt, technology has definitely made the world a better place, but this unhealthy, dependent relationship we have with our phones is robbing us of our most creative selves. German psychologist Theodor Lipps proposed one of the first definitions of boredom in 1903, saying, "Boredom is a feeling of displeasure arising out of conflict between a need for intense mental activity and lack of incitement to it, or inability to be incited." In other words, it's an underwhelming state where none of the options available to us seem appealing. Instead of letting this feeling run its course, we overstimulate our brain and prevent it from taking advantage of the true power of this downtime. Our first instinct when we experience boredom is to just endlessly scroll through feeds, swishing through social media apps, even when we're walking from one room to the next or waiting for the cashier to bag our groceries. We've become conditioned to constantly seek out novelty and deliver a hit of dopamine to our brain. Sadly, once that sense of novelty fades, it leaves behind a stronger feeling of boredom, which we then try to get rid of with even more stimulation. It's a vicious cycle that keeps our brain occupied. Mindless entertainment designed to capture our attention for the longest time possible. Studies have shown that, when given tasks that require minimum mental capacity, participants often contemplated their future and their plans for it. On the other hand, if your brain is constantly consumed by stimuli, it'll rarely have the time to think of the bigger picture and is less likely to set goals for the future or to be more creative. A 2017 study from Georgia Institute of Technology measured the brain patterns of more than 100 people. Participants were asked to focus on a stationary point while they lay in a MRI machine. The goal was to figure out which areas of the brain worked together during an awake but resting state. The team compared the data with questionnaires that the participants filled out about how much their minds wandered in daily life. It turns out participants who had reported more frequent daydreaming scored higher on intellectual and creative ability and had more efficient brain systems recorded on the MRI. These findings are supported by a lot of artists when discussing their creative process. In his book Creative Quest, music producer and drummer for The Roots, Questlove, wrote about his battle against the many distractions available to us in today's world. On the face of it, it doesn't make any sense. Boredom seems like the least creative feeling, but it's actually a way of clearing space for a new idea to spring back up. Similarly, J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series, formulated all the ideas for her book in a 4-hour train ride from Manchester to London. If she had an iPad and binge-watched her favorite Netflix show instead, she probably wouldn't have brought Harry in his magical world to life. In his book Daily Rituals, Mason Curry studied the routines of hundreds of other artists, writers, and creatives, and concluded that boredom is a recurring theme that leads to the mind wandering and having a kind of diffused focus which allows for creative production. This diffused state is when the mind enters its default mode and comes up with its best work. Perhaps the best proof of this truth is none other than Albert Einstein himself. Einstein took over where Newton left off and gave us a more advanced definition of gravity with the notion of a curved spacetime. Einstein was known for his extremely vivid imagination and inspired thought experiments that allowed him to define time as the fourth dimension, and to change our understanding of the mechanics of the universe itself. Many people believe that the seeds of his genius were planted during the year he took off from high school in the 1890s, when he simply wandered without purpose and contemplated the world, free from any external pressures. Throughout his life, Einstein would take regular walks to clear his mind, and in a letter he wrote to his friends while sailing in 1932, he said, "A cruise in the sea is an excellent opportunity for maximum calm and reflection on ideas from a different perspective." It was clear that he knew the importance of sitting still and letting the mind wander. Our history is full of many great thinkers who have been conscious enough to take advantage of their downtime and utilize it in the name of creative production. Psychologists today encourage parents to allow their children to be bored instead of occupying all their time watching YouTube on their tablets. The idea is to give the young minds the time and space needed to discover, create, and find their own genius. Teaching people, especially kids, how to use technology to improve their lives while also self-regulating their exposure to it should be a crucial part of digital literacy. There's a saying used in tech: when the product is free, you are the product. Our attention is being fought for by a magnitude of applications, and at the end of the day, we're left with no time to just sit and contemplate on our own life and experiences. But that shouldn't be the case. Next time you find yourself reaching for your phone when you're bored, remember, you're choosing to voluntarily shock yourself, instead of looking out the window and contemplating on your own metaphorical apple falling from the tree. You'd be surprised what your mind can achieve when you just allow it to wander for a moment. Every choice you've ever made is a result of the combination of all the experiences you've had, things you've learned, and people you've met. So what happens when an algorithm designed to make the most money for corporations decides the experiences you have, things you learn, and people you meet? The For You page on social media platforms like TikTok acts like a warped mirror, reflecting back a distorted vision of reality. As you bask in your reflection, you're slowly drawn into something sinister. A digital mirror that starts with truths, but slowly manipulates your desires and beliefs. As trends and viral content shape your perception, you might find yourself wondering where certain thoughts come from, leading you further down a rabbit hole. Well, we found what's at the end of the hole, and it isn't pretty. Today you'll learn the science behind algorithms, the disturbing truth about echo chambers, and the final act of thunderous applause we're all heading towards. Picture this. You're in a massive control room filled with supercomputers and fancy sensors. In front of you is your trusty smartphone displaying your social media feed. It's the typical setup where your boredom reaches its peak. Time to scroll for a bit. Every time you hover over a video for a split second longer than usual, the computer records it. Every time you double tap, it's recorded. Every share, comment, and even half scroll is recorded. It's almost like each trace of hesitance or decisiveness is recognized by the machine. But why? This isn't Skynet, it's just memes and things you like. Well, it's all done to build a profile of you, and this profile version of you works based on something instinctive, maybe even primal. Generally, when you interact with your feed, it's not like there's any anxiety or thought going into it, you're just doing what feels natural. Here's the twist, though. Soon enough, the computer figures out what makes you tick. It hacks your algorithm first. Once that's done, the next step in the takeover begins, and it's not just about throwing stuff in that you like. It's about gaining your trust, keeping you watching, and bringing in the end of free will. The TikTok For You page, or FYP, is a prime example of modern algorithms and the power they hold in the 21st century. Before the For You page came along, algorithms generally felt like some mysterious back-end way to control users. Mostly shrouded in secrecy, we finally got a public idea of how this stuff works in 2021, when we saw major companies like Meta scrambling in the US Supreme Court, attempting to explain how their algorithms functioned. Sure, that enlightened the public a bit. However, it wasn't until TikTok's boom that most people got a real look at algorithmic supremacy and the dangers we stand to face. It's like a new arms and space race, but we are the nuclear arsenal, and the puppet masters can't wait to throw us at ourselves. Algorithms offer an advanced way to blur the lines between personalization and manipulation. They first analyze the stuff you've interacted with, then they proceed to predict what you will interact with. Remember, it's not a human, it's a diligent and scarily efficient machine.
It's easy to fall into the trap of mindless scrolling, consuming content that won't add any meaningful value to your life. But the first step to preventing brain rot is to take control of the content you consume and your online experience in general.
For TikTok, two main things drive the algorithm: machine learning and behavioral data. There's a lot of underlying engineering behind all of it, but those concepts stand at the forefront. It's not just there to react to your actions, it's learning from you, refining its predictions and improving. Unlike social media a decade ago, TikTok's algorithm is very aggressive. Older platforms like Facebook and pre-dumpster fire Twitter were benevolent in the tech scene. They showed users content from people they follow and sprinkled in suggestions once in a while. Meanwhile, on TikTok, the following tab simply exists to give you the illusion of choice. Don't believe me? Answer truthfully. How often do you find yourself scrolling through your TikTok following tab? Probably like 5% of the time you spend on the app, maybe less. Even crazier, the following tab is designed to feel subpar to your explore page. Once you've gone through like 15 videos on your following, it starts to recommend the same videos you saw 5 minutes ago. Now sure, you could refresh it hoping for a change, but at that point, the algorithm knows you'll pick the easier road, which is to swipe left and head back to the explore page. It's like, do you want to go back to the thing that just disappointed you? Or give in and confide in the warm embrace of an algorithm that knows exactly what you should be seeing right now? The explore page's prominence is all-encompassing. You're constantly exposed to videos that are hyper-tailored to certain aspects of its internal idea of you. Slowly but surely, it reinforces you into being comfortable with the idea that it has your convenience in mind. TikTok doesn't just care about the videos you like, though. Overt positivity is never going to give advertisers the most money, so trust that they are taking things a step further. In this case, TikTok learns about your preferences, desires, envies, vices, and even your fears. Let's break down the stuff they're watching. If you're an amateur TikTok creator, take this as a free mini crash course on what you should be looking out for. The algorithm categorizes videos based on metrics like hashtags, metadata, and most recognizably, sounds. So, hashtag FYP is a very redundant thing to have in your TikTok, just so you know. Instead, hashtags are best used for sorting content into categories like gaming, dance videos, cooking, or other sub-niches or interests. Next, we've got the metadata. In a nutshell, this is just data about data. The computer has your information as a user, but it also has to make sense of all of it in order for the learning part of machine learning to actually matter. Metadata sorts all the information it gets from you and puts it into categories that are arranged internally. Another interesting way TikTok groups content is according to a user's emotional state. If you're feeling sad, happy, anxious, or excited while watching certain types of videos, it records that data and tries to push content that matches your mood. With advanced emotion tracking features, TikTok is able to sense your facial expressions or tone of voice in videos. Think about it, when you watch content with a sad tone, you might sigh or have a solemn expression. TikTok actually keeps track of these moments through your camera and microphone, which makes it easier for the algorithm to push content matching your specific mood. And finally, there's sounds. This one is pretty simple. Did you enjoy a video using a specific sound? TikTok will recommend videos with that sound to you even more. Why? Because sound tends to have a certain format behind their use, so it's easier for the algorithm to push successful videos that use the same ones. All social media platforms tend to have some type of recommendation algorithm embedded into them. However, TikTok's For You page stands at the top due to some critical differences. The For You page is wicked fast. Within just a few swipes, it can start tailoring your content to an eerie degree of efficiency. Meanwhile, platforms like Meta tend to take much longer to fine-tune what they show you. That's probably because, unlike TikTok's quick-fire algorithm, they're actually obligated to care about the people you follow and relationships you've built over time. These older platforms have entire legacies based on user-curated selections. Now, the formula for content consumption has changed, so it's hard for them to keep up. On platforms such as YouTube and Facebook, users tend to come across suggested content in random bits. There's no rush to it. At least that's how those platforms were in the past. Nowadays, they're trying to do the TikTok thing, but with inferior algorithms. Meanwhile, TikTok has condensed the entire experience into one giant, endless scroll. Even scarier, every video you see is hyper-focused in its recommendation for you. No distractions, just bullseyes. Alright, let's take a step back. The algorithm is all-knowing and all-powerful, at least as far as we've explained it thus far. But this content has been tailored towards your preferences. Sure, it's addicting, but that's not necessarily a world-ending type of bad. So why should anyone care? Here's the part where things take a darker turn. Your favorite actor just wore the most amazing outfit for a red carpet appearance. You are in awe, and in that moment you decide that you want a similar body type. So you hop onto TikTok and check out some dieting tips. You watch a few videos, save info in your notes app, the usual routine. Later that day you open TikTok again and it has recorded your diligent research focused on dieting. Your use of keywords was particularly insightful for the machine. Weight loss, healthy diet, home exercises, and the like. It can sense that you enjoy videos with noticeable changes in a short span of time. And it's ready to make things happen. Your algorithm begins to feed you more intense fitness content. None of the mild stuff. Before you know it, you're in a rabbit hole of extreme dieting content. Not because you asked for it, but because you're hooked and it knows that you can't help but watch. The algorithm tends to manipulate your preferences by nudging you into content that might be more engaging, but not necessarily beneficial. Subconsciously, your desires are reprogrammed without any conscious input. You don't just want to lose weight anymore, you suddenly find yourself interested in extreme weight loss methods from videos on your feed. When you open TikTok, you're probably not there to take control. You're there to be entertained, and that's that. Even the act of tapping on the icon lights up your brain with dopamine. The same thing happens when you have a bite of your favorite donut or ace a tough challenge. Each video you like is a quick hit. This is where the For You page gets both brilliant and dangerous. The algorithm knows that unpredictable rewards tend to trigger more dopamine. It's like a magician pulling rabbits out of a hat, keeping your brain chasing that next rush, video after video. The longer you stay, the deeper the loop goes. And here's where the problem lies. That endless loop doesn't challenge your brain or help it grow. You're being spoon-fed content that keeps you passive and engaged. It feels like you're learning, but there's something missing. You're not actually fulfilled. And worst of all, this loop can lead to deep, sinister consequences. It all starts off innocently enough, and there's no better example than this guy. Meet Caleb Kane. In his early 20s, Caleb, like most men his age, was pretty lost. To let off some stress, he turned to YouTube, where he'd watch motivational videos and gaming content. While browsing, he came across Stefan Molyneux, a far-right American YouTuber who tends to get recommended when people watch videos from Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson. The video from Stefan was pretty tame, some content on self-improvement, and Caleb could relate to his difficult childhood. Slowly though, things began to change. It wasn't just self-improvement anymore. The bait was cast and bitten, and Caleb found himself drawn to a recommendation algorithm that pushed him towards more radical creators. Eventually he realized how far he had gone, and pulled himself out of that rabbit hole. Not many young men are so lucky. YouTube's radicalization pipeline has been subject to numerous studies, and experts have noticed a trend. Young men seem to begin with harmless interests. Like Caleb, they begin watching innocent enough content centered on gaming, fitness, and motivation. Eventually, the algorithm learns what keeps them engaged, and they are exposed to more polarizing content. Some people are able to resist and filter their feeds, however, the overwhelming majority are subject to a feed filled with controversial political ideas. It's not just random, it's made to feel like the natural evolution of each young man's interests. Overall, the alt-right pipeline isn't anything new, especially if you've been on the internet for a while. It's a topic that has been beaten to death, sure, but the horse still has a pulse, and maybe a few more smacks wouldn't hurt. We've talked about the algorithm and how it keeps you hooked, but there's an even bigger issue beneath it all. It feels like there's a lot of pressure, and the pot is welded shut. The mental health toll of social media is an even more widespread issue. Dealing with your For You page can feel like you're trapped in a cycle where your self-worth is tied to external validation. And if you're just a lurker or passive user, all the signs on your feed are designed to feel like your lifestyle is wrong. It's like there's an invisible voice claiming that you should be posting consistently, sharing your life with strangers, and craving the external validation tied to views, likes, and shares. Now, if you're the type that enjoys posting, there's a lot to worry about. Plus, the bigger you get, the more pressure builds up. If you think you can handle the feedback loop, then go for it. Here's the catch, though. External validation is addictive. The more you get, the more you crave, and soon you'll find yourself checking your phone constantly, waiting for the next like or comment to give you that quick hit. You can take it from experts. According to the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, teenagers who spend more time on social media are more likely to experience symptoms of depression and anxiety. If you're a teenager, there's no surprise in the slightest. It's just another fact, like hearing the sky is blue. Here's the thing, though. Even though it feels obvious, the impact on your mental health is real. That's why we'll get to explore real things you can try in order to get better. Alright, when was the last time you and your friends were watching the same stuff, like sports? Nah, one of them's working too late. Marvel's show? Well, Marvel's fallen off. Maybe later. Severance? Wait, people use Apple TV? Like, it's confusing. In real life, trying to stay on the same wavelength with your community feels almost impossible. There's barely any chance for a water cooler moment anymore. A moment to discuss last night's big TV show or football game. Everyone's watched something different on their own, but you know where you can find people who watch your preferred content. That's right, social media. Cultural monoliths once bound us together. Like it or not, everyone had a common topic to discuss. Now, even in our households, it's like there's completely different realities taking place. Someone's binge watching cooking tutorials while the person in the next room is drowning in political memes and shocking headlines. Gone are the days when social media was a place to follow like-minded people from your community. Now, even basic conversations with old friends feels like trying to decode a cryptic language. There's so many inside jokes you'll never understand simply because they're scrolling in a different timeline. You've probably felt it too. A major shift that happened with the internet in 2016, the American presidential elections. Prior to those elections, America's divisiveness was mostly prevalent among older millennials and baby boomers. 8 years later, and it's like things have flipped upside down. Now loud voices from the left and right dominate the discourse, debating ceaselessly over countless issues. It's no longer about politics, but culture, identity, and everything in between. If we had to pick the most insidious effects of the For You page, echo chambers would be at the top of our list. Take a look at political content, left-leaning, right, or somewhere else. Once the machine learns your preferences, it starts to narrow your exposure, revealing a large amount of content that aligns with a specific political ideology. Over time, this makes viewers develop a tough external shell, one that rejects opposing viewpoints and firmly keeps people rooted in their beliefs. It gets even worse, though. People who hold different opinions aren't just worthy of a disagreement, they should be distrusted. Along the way, you might start to question everyone's intelligence or morality. Why does this happen? Well, most likely your For You page has led you down a worldview that props itself up as the objective truth and valid direction. In extreme cases, this leads to radicalization, and at the least extreme, it leads to division. Make no mistake, the world has always been a place filled with polarization. Human beings enjoy a good debate. PlayStation or Xbox, Yanny or Laurel, the harmless stuff. Nowadays, though, everything is at an extreme. With social media algorithms, the problem gets exacerbated, turning harmless differences into battlegrounds of belief. Alright. Do we sound a bit too centrist for your tastes? Allow us to paint a picture of radicalization. To do that, we'll have to talk about memes. Yes, memes, quick-witted, funny, and spreading like a wildfire. Everybody loves a good meme. In just a few seconds, a meme can strongly convey an idea. Thanks to the way they work, the best memes are easy to digest. Yet memes aren't just lighthearted and fun, at least not all the time. They can be powerful tools of manipulation, and manipulation is a key word that repeats itself down this For You page rabbit hole. Most memes start off with a kernel of truth. They present information in a way that feels factual, even when it's oversimplified or outright false. If you've played video games for a while, you're probably familiar with the term NPCs. Non-playable characters. Around 2018, a meme started off where people who weren't part of a certain community were considered NPCs. It's nice to have your own little bubble where everyone else who doesn't get it feels like a random computer-generated character. It's relatable for gamers and it fosters a sense of community with your fellow non-NPCs. And now that there's an inside joke with the community, it's easier to influence the people within. Take it from the incel communities. What are the truths they begin with? Let's be honest, dating in the modern world can be difficult and many people, particularly guys, tend to deal with a fair amount of rejection, loneliness, and feeling overlooked in society, especially when their social media is filled with idealized relationships and a lot of value placed on physical attractiveness. These are real emotions, and many of them can relate to this. If you encountered a YouTuber that voiced out these things, you'd probably nod in agreement and might feel inclined to hear what else they have to say. The problem is that those frustrations only get amplified within a community of like-minded, downtrodden young men. What starts off as feelings of disappointment can quickly turn into a toxic environment, one that reinforces a victim mentality. It becomes an echo chamber, and over time, this worldview becomes more rigid and extreme. Often, you're not even aware you're being lied to. It's like a part of you has found comfort in finally hearing a voice willing to tell the truth. Instead of dancing around a topic, it's nice to have a trustworthy source that's willing to spill nothing but facts. It's a calming feeling to trust a creator, to trust us. But what if we've lied to you before? Earlier in this video, we discussed TikTok's content categories, highlighting how the platform's algorithm curates the perfect For You page for each user. One of the things we mentioned was how TikTok is capable of tracking a user's emotional state through their smartphone camera and microphone. That was just a lie. It's not a complete stretch to imagine that the platform is capable of doing such things, however, it's factually incorrect. If we hadn't pointed this out, that little kernel of misinformation could have created a myriad of reactions. Some viewers might react with increased anxiety and paranoia, while others might begin to believe inaccurate judgments about data privacy. And on the extreme end, we might even get a few birds or CIA robot fans from the Aperture fan base, which, while entertaining, isn't really quite what we're going for. Here's where things get philosophical. One of the most unsettling questions of the digital age is this: are we really making our own choices anymore? Or are we simply following fragments of free will littered like fireflies, leading us deeper into an inescapable maze? The death of free will has haunted our species for centuries. Sentience is a privilege that took us to the stars, but the bane of our existence lies in the arrogance of believing we're always in control. In philosophy, there's a concept that perfectly encapsulates this modern dynamic dance we have with the For You page. It's called determinism. It's an idea that all events, including our human actions, are predetermined by pre-existing causes. Think of your For You page as a result of your past behaviors, your browsing patterns, interactions, and clicks. All those past actions are shaping the digital choices you'll make tomorrow. It's an invisible feedback loop that subtly guides your behavior, all without you noticing. We've actually made a video on this before, and you should check that out if you'd like a deep dive into the dangers of infinite scrolling. The internet wasn't always this way. For a long time, it was a peaceful beach filled with endless waves of opportunity. Much like what we did to real beaches, the internet is no longer pristine. The seashells of novelty are gone, and in their place we've got a shoreline littered with digital garbage. Nothing but subtle, ironic ads that blend into the landscape. It's almost poetic, being reminded of Coca-Cola's existence thanks to a plastic bottle that washed ashore. Back then, you would type random searches into Google, click on fancy new blogs, and stumble upon obscure forums, and enjoy the beauty of it all. The internet was vast, decentralized, and designed for us to get lost in the endless possibility of what we might find. No Reddit thread filled with armchair experts deciding the answers to every question. Sure, modern answers are more useful, but there was something charming about Yahoo Answers and the downright ridiculous replies people usually got to questions. There was no SEO sorting for common sense, it was just people being their authentic, humorous, and stubborn selves. The content wasn't curated for any metrics in a room somewhere. Discovery is gone, and in its place we have pure consumption. The algorithm ensures that you are attended to, which sounds great in theory, but it limits your exposure to the unexpected, uncomfortable, and unfamiliar. Science has shown us that going through the unknown is when our best learning happens. It's no fun being told what's right. Instead, it's nice to find solutions through trial and error, acknowledging the disappointment of failure, stepping up and finding courage to find answers. Journey before destination. Would it have been satisfying if Frodo and the Fellowship marched straight into Mount Doom without a hitch? And a tale of really competent hobbits solving every problem with ease. Who would care about that? The journey with all of its painful obstacles is what made their story meaningful. This raises an important question. If the internet has become so controlled and personalized, is there room left for true autonomy? Or are we just passive consumers, led through a digital landscape where thoughts and choices are predetermined by the platforms we use? Nowadays, one of the clearest examples of free will's erosion is in hyper-targeted advertising. Tech companies have perfected the art of predicting consumer behavior on a dangerous level. It's to the point where they might be able to influence purchasing decisions without the user ever realizing what's going on. Now, you might want to believe that you're choosing to buy a certain product. Meanwhile, in reality, you've been nudged in that direction for weeks, all thanks to the subtlety of tailored content. It's not just products that are our biggest concern. Algorithms are influencing the way we vote, the media we consume, and even the people we spend our lives with. In today's digital space, tech giants like Google stand at the top of a massive row of dominoes. With 92% of all traffic dedicated to Google search, it's hard to trust results provided by a single organization. A recent court case against Google has raised serious concerns about how tech companies have the ability to manipulate users through their monopoly on information. With Google's search algorithm, much like TikTok's For You page, users aren't just given the most relevant information. Instead, you're giving information deemed most likely to keep you engaged. Unfortunately, this isn't always in our best interests. Where are we headed with all this? It seems like the For You page's influence reaches far beyond the fabric of entertainment. Instead, it trails down to our politics, culture, and even how we perceive each other. The insidious machine has forced our society into bubbles of isolation, and we're floating with uncertainty about when they might burst. Billions of bubbles popping simultaneously, heralding the end of liberty in a thunderous applause. Convenience is amazing. Who doesn't love access to stuff with the push of a button? However, every warning about a dystopia has been cautionary about the erosion of freedom under the guise of comfort and convenience. The stories like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, published in 1932, we explored a world that was set into a dystopia through the manipulation of pleasure and control, instead of overt authoritarian oppression. Huxley's vision was a society that was largely pacified thanks to the spread of drugs and superficial pleasures. But on a larger scale, we're being pacified with endless and constant access to modern pleasures, shaping our preferences and perspectives without us realizing it. Recently, ADHD diagnoses have skyrocketed considerably, in no doubt thanks to the attention economy we live in. It's hard for minds to stay focused in a world of convenience and instant dopamine rushes. We've seen some seismic shifts in culture and politics since the algorithms became more advanced. Think about how quickly internet trends transition into the real world. Take the infamous devious lick trend, where TikTok challenges led teenagers to steal or vandalize school property for virality. What started as a joke ended up costing schools thousands of dollars in damages, disrupting entire communities. It's not just harmless pranks or petty vandalism. The For You page has shaped more serious topics and societal movements. From radical political ideologies to the manosphere, we've seen some questionable ideas gain traction. The little dark age edits of dudes in military gear have slowly transformed into a soundtrack for neo-Nazis to create edits in approval of dangerous ideologies. This isn't the first time we've seen a harmless idea turn into an instrument for vectors of misinformation. Famously, Pepe the Frog, a once innocent cartoon character, was transformed into a symbol of hate somehow. It started off as an internet meme, but now the character is forever attached to a complicated, politically charged history. It's not just Pepe, though. The lines between humor and political discourse feel completely faded. Nowadays, it's hard to distinguish a dog whistle or coded message from a regular harmless joke. This is by design. The For You page's focus on engagement transcends all, and these are the consequences. When we look at the larger picture, the For You page's true power is clearer than ever. It's not just shaping trends and political beliefs, it's reshaping our true sense of self. With an ability to influence your identity, it slowly reinforces pre-existing biases, limiting growth and critical thinking skills. Ultimately, we have to look in the mirror once more. Now that we can see the true mechanisms of our digital selves, we're beginning to realize that the reflection lacks a distinct element of humanity. Sure, this version of ourselves that the algorithm recognizes is brilliantly curated. It's almost indistinguishable from reality, but there's something missing. Almost like a gift from our evolutionary ancestors. The uncanny valley kicks in, and we instinctively recognize the inhuman. So what does the algorithm get wrong? Potential. This machine has only ever understood humanity based on data it's been fed. Meanwhile, every person on Earth is a culmination of an almost infinite, unfathomable amount of coincidences. Crazy, odd, and downright ridiculous moments that no algorithm could ever predict. The chaos, the randomness, is what truly defines us. And if chaos got us this far, why surrender to a machine's shallow understanding of order? As a species, the time has come to break out of these invisible cages. We have to actively seek out new perspectives, challenge our own biases, and take conscious control of our digital consumption. Only then can we avoid becoming mere products of an algorithm. Standing at this crossroads, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by the sheer power of algorithms that are able to shape our identities. But the truth is that we've evolved beyond the control that these machines are capable of establishing. We just need to tap into the confidence we found millions of years ago when we discovered new ways to live. So the next time you open up your For You page, remember, it's not just entertainment or a distraction, it's shaping you in ways you might not even realize. The question is, will you let it? Or will you step outside the algorithmic bubble, embrace the unknown, and rediscover your true potential? The choice, as always, is yours.
In 2010, around 40,000 people died from drug overdoses in the United States. Quantifying the importance and meaning of individual human life in a single statistic is impossible. But that number might already seem high, especially if you knew one of those people. But it gets worse. So much worse. In 2021, more than 100,000 people died from drug overdose, and that number seems to continue to increase each year. Pinpointing an exact reason behind these rising numbers is complicated, but it all starts with these 5 words: fentanyl and the dark web. According to a UCLA study, fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that's 50 times stronger than heroin, was responsible for around 10% of drug overdose deaths in 2010. In 2015, the first spike of deaths as a result of fentanyl overdose happened. It remained localized in the eastern United States for several years until 2019, when it made its way across the country. Suddenly, everyone was exposed and death rates skyrocketed. As of 2021, a staggering 66% of drug overdoses were as a result of fentanyl, and that number keeps rising. Now you might say, what's the problem? If people take drugs, they should be willing to face the consequences, and while you may be right, the problem is that most people who are dying from fentanyl overdose aren't even aware they're consuming it. And it's all because of one group of people: the fentanyl kings of the dark web, criminal gangs who have figured out how to manufacture and distribute fentanyl illegally. Because fentanyl is much cheaper to produce than other drugs, they've begun lacing it with those other drugs and selling them to unsuspecting users. This is the true cause of the fentanyl crisis. Between 2010 and 2021, the amount of drugs used didn't double, nor did the number of users. In fact, drug use hasn't increased very much, it's just become much more lethal. There is a solution, but it's a rather radical one that requires an open mind to even consider. What if we controlled the supply itself instead of trying to control the suppliers? If you can't beat them, join them, if you will. It could be that the only way to truly protect people from tainted drugs is to start right at the source by controlling the supply itself and having it produced and distributed legally. It might sound like a crazy idea, but it's actually being considered by governments worldwide right now. The approach isn't all that crazy when you think about how the opioid crisis exploded. Gone are the days of drugs being distributed on street corners or from corrupt doctors. Many now come from a much more sinister place: the dark web. Drug buyers no longer need a back alley to sell drugs. People don't need to steal from pharmacies or doctors' offices to get pills. They can sit at their computer or on their phone and purchase their drug of choice and have it delivered to their home. Using special browsers and software that conceals your IP addresses, users are hard, if not almost impossible, to trace on the dark web. This makes it the perfect place for secret shops to sell illegal substances. Unsurprisingly, this poses a massive challenge for law enforcement, which is trying to crack down on the illegal drug trade. The dark web leads investigators and police on a never-ending game of whack-a-mole as they try and stamp out anonymous markets, only to see new ones pop up. One software called Tor routes user data through servers worldwide, disguising your IP address. This means that communications between the buyer and seller end up scrambled, for lack of a better term. Then you add crypto as a means of monetary exchange, and you can see why it's almost impossible to regulate our way out of this mess. All of this has helped fuel the fentanyl crisis. The dark web offers an accessible vehicle to buy drugs and opens up the sellers to a whole market that wasn't there before. The people who are curious but not about to commit a crime out in the open, now they can do it from their couch. Yes, the dark web has benefits. Whistleblowers who work in government or other industries can alert journalists to important facts without being identified. People in authoritarian regimes might use the dark web to avoid detection or having their internet tracked. But the same features that make the dark web appealing for people who are trying to stay safe lure in drug traffickers to avoid police surveillance. By now, the dark web is so global that even municipal police officers have to look globally to track down shipments and transactions of illegal drugs. And if one site gets shut down, another one inevitably will take its place. But before it even makes it onto the dark web, dealers have to decide to use it. Fentanyl doesn't end up in shipments of cocaine by mistake. So why lace it in there if the chance for fatality is so high? Some dealers think they can mitigate the risk by measuring fentanyl carefully. If done correctly, fentanyl can help create a stream of return customers because it's so addictive. This explains why it's so often found in cocaine or in counterfeit Xanax and Adderall. It's more addictive than those drugs themselves, so it keeps people coming back for more. Also, there's the capitalist argument. It's cheaper than the other opioids. A small fraction of fentanyl can mimic the high of larger doses of other opioids like heroin or painkillers. Dealers will use simple binding agents and a small amount of fentanyl when they make counterfeit opioid pills because it helps their bottom line. The potency of fentanyl also makes it a really easy drug to traffic. A formerly incarcerated dealer claimed that he could make over 10 times the amount of counterfeit pills when he used fentanyl instead of other drugs on their own. Even though fentanyl is heavily regulated in hospitals or other medical settings, it's not regulated at all on the internet, much less the dark web. So small mistakes by uneducated, malicious, or ignorant dealers can be fatal. The big question is, can we stop it? Of course, to do that, we need to know who the people behind these dark websites are, the operations. Just like the infamous drug lords like Pablo Escobar or El Chapo, there are kingpins running the dark web trade as well. It all started with a site called Silk Road, the first large-scale dark web drug market, which began in 2011. It received a lot of media attention, and eventually, law enforcement was able to step in and shut it down in 2013, but more sites took its place. Alphabay popped up and was shut down in 2017, but has recently been clawing its way back to the top. Dream Market was also a popular market until it was shuttered in 2019. Its inner workings can tell us a lot about how these sites function. Dream Market had around 100,000 listings and at the time was the biggest dark web shopping center for drugs. More than half its listings were for illicit substances, although it also sold things like designer clothes, counterfeit money, and stolen online banking information. The shopping experience is similar to what most of us experience when we need a new yoga mat or that random piece that broke off your fridge. Buyers can go to any of these sites, search the inventory, and pay in crypto, and the drugs will arrive on their doorstep. And like the typical online shopping experience, buyers can leave reviews for vendors and products. Let's say you're buying a new TV. You might go online and read some reviews, look for the best deal, or see which retailers are the most reputable for what you're looking for. The worst case scenario is you might buy a shoddy TV. But on the dark web drug markets, the worst case scenario is you buy drugs that are laced with something like fentanyl that could kill you. The reviews might read like an old product on Amazon, but they are as consequential as it gets. One review on Dream Market of 100 milligrams of the drug carfentanil said, "It took forever to find a new carfent supplier, finally found a good vendor. It's great." It reads innocent enough, but carfentanil is a synthetic opioid used to sedate large animals that is even more potent than fentanyl. 100 milligrams is enough to kill dozens of people. With all the difficulty around taking down sites and kingpins that operate them, there have been some high-profile success stories in curbing the dark web drug market. A 40-year-old Indian-British man named Banmeet Singh ran an international drug ring from his home in the UK. He was charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering and to distribute and possess with intent to distribute controlled substances in April 2024. He admitted that from 2012 to 2017 he was active on the dark web drug market, distributing heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, ecstasy, LSD, ketamine, Xanax, and plenty of other drugs. He had to surrender more than 4,000 Bitcoin, which was valued at more than 245 million, and was given the same priority level of threat as El Chapo. Then there was Operation Spectre, an enforcement operation from the US Department of Justice that ended in May 2023 that was meant to target opioid and fentanyl trafficking on the dark web. The operation resulted in 288 arrests, the most ever for this type of operation, and the seizure of 117 firearms and 850 kilograms of drugs, which also included 64 kilograms of fentanyl or fentanyl-laced narcotics. On top of all that, they also seized $53 million in cash in crypto. This international effort spanned 3 continents to disrupt fentanyl and opioid trafficking, and was accompanied by a public awareness campaign to promote resources for those struggling with substance abuse. The operation's message to criminals on the dark web is, you can try and hide in the furthest reaches of the internet, but the Justice Department will find you and hold you accountable for your crimes. This only furthered the Drug Enforcement Agency's commitment to shutting down the fentanyl and opioid supply chain from beginning to end. They may be committed now, but the dark web keeps growing and growing, and inevitably another kingpin will pop up, and no matter how successful they've been in the past, authorities will just need to start over again. So is it more effective to try and shut it all down, or just control the supply instead? In the 1920s, the US banned alcohol, but people didn't stop drinking. They went underground, and illegal traffickers operated similarly to how those on the dark web operate now. Illegal activity increased, there was no regulation, and alcohol that was much stronger and more dangerous than what had previously been for sale became widely available. Are we in this era with the drug trade? And if so, is it time to rethink our approach? The goal is, by whatever means necessary, to save lives.
I am sorry. Those were the words uttered by Asa Raskin, the creator of the Infinite Scroll, after realizing his invention destroyed billions of people around the world. This one simple feature turned us into addicts. Is it too late for us to stop doom scrolling? If you've ever felt this searing pain going up your arm at the end of a long day, it's most likely caused by an inflamed tendon that runs along the inside of your hand and forearm. And of the most likely causes of this inflation is infinite scrolling. Like any other muscle, tissue, or joint in our body, the muscles in our hands and arms can get aggravated with overuse. The repetitive, constant motion of scrolling might not be some grand act of athleticism. Still, considering how much time we spend swiping our thumb or finger up and down, it's no surprise that many have developed this pain from overuse. And it's not just our bodies feeling the effects of infinite scrolling, we're increasingly isolated, anxious, and addicted, as we're bombarded with endless content that, for the most part, isn't improving our lives. Almost none of us can say we haven't felt negatively affected by a post or a video we've seen on social media. It's impossible to avoid. So how did we get here, and how did the infinite scroll become so ubiquitous in modern life? How does it keep us so engaged, and do we have any hope of escaping it? Humans weren't made to sit and stare at screens all day. Our ancestors were always on the move, running, jumping, and hunting. That's why I love the Olympics. It's a celebration of our natural athletic spirit. In ancient Egypt, scrolls were physical papers that were dramatically unfurled, revealing paintings and writings meant to enrich society. These scrolls, which were used for centuries, were finite, singular items that expressed specific ideas. That finality is exactly what the concept of infinite scrolling has eliminated. Despite the lingering pain you might feel in your forearm, scrolling has also taken the physical act out of being on the internet. In the days of the desktop computer, we needed our whole body to scroll. We had to sit in a chair and use all our fingers to type and move one hand to the mouse. The early days of being online had athletic terms like surfing. They hinted at some sort of deep, active exploration of the internet. And then the screens shrank. The devices shrank. We could have the experience of being online without moving anything but a single finger. With the invention of infinite scrolling, the adventurous nature of being online started disappearing. It became a passive activity rather than an active exploration. Now it's less like surfing and more like exposure therapy. We're stuck in place with our eyes locked on the screen, and we can't pull ourselves away to experience the actual world around us. The inventor of the infinite scroll, web designer Asa Raskin, has now made a second career out of his regret for inventing it back in 2006. While the passive activity might feel good in the moment, it's hard to argue that it is good. Of course, there are important, educational, and amazing things to learn on the internet and social media. There's communities to be found and skills to be taught, but the endlessness of it all has made us slaves to the algorithm instead of curious, intentional users. Scrolling has become a key element of our digital lives, so much so that we sometimes don't even realize we're doing it. How many times have you picked up your phone and, seemingly without realizing it, ended up 20 scrolls deep on TikTok? Scrolling is so second nature that it's not even an intentional act. Instead, it's how we spend our passive time. The mega corporations behind all the popular social media platforms wouldn't want it any other way. Our instinctive behavior to scroll reinforces their algorithms and has created an entire economy built on our attention spans. If we stay hooked on our phones longer, we present more opportunities to advertisers to sell us things and therefore more opportunities for large tech companies to make money. The infinite scroll makes this cycle all but certain. Human brains have adapted to consume what's in front of us. It's not just puppy videos and vacation pics that keep us returning for more. In a 2005 study, researchers presented participants with bowls of soup connected to a tube that would automatically refill the bowl. The participants ate 70% more soup than others with normal bowls without even noticing. You can think of infinite scrolling like that tube at the bottom of the bowl, constantly there to refill our brain with a soup seasoned with content without us even realizing it. Tech companies have hijacked our brains and gotten us hooked on their products by tapping into our reward system. The brain's reward system produces dopamine, a neurotransmitter known as the feel-good hormone. When we're hit with a shot of dopamine, we feel excited, elated, and motivated. We need dopamine to be productive, to feel creative, and to get out of bed. But social media triggers a massive and quick release of dopamine that makes us feel like we're on a high. Normal dopamine levels help us get through our day and are often released at a slow, steady pace. These big spikes in dopamine that we experience when someone likes a photo we've posted or discovers a video that excites us can be deceiving. They trick us into thinking we will only feel good if we keep getting those big spikes. And that is called addiction. You might have felt something like this if you've ever parted ways with your phone for a day or even an hour. When we're disconnected from that addicting infinite scroll, our brain releases the stress hormone, cortisol, because it's not getting the intense hits of dopamine that it's used to. Our neural pathways are used to feeling activated, and suddenly they're stripped of that feeling. For some of us, this can happen with merely a few minutes away from social media. But if you can last a day, you might start to feel your heart rate increase, your blood pressure jump, or anxiety set in. The lack of reward you've been promised by endless scrolling on social media is hitting you, and you feel deprived as the stimulus has been removed. This reaction, or rather craving, is exactly how social media companies keep us using their platforms, even in the face of our own unhappiness. Social media takes human connection and turns it into a drug. When we interact with social media, our brains light up in the same way as when we take drugs or drink alcohol. However, this drug on our phones that we can endlessly scroll through is available 24/7. The algorithm learns what we like and pushes us towards content we didn't even know we wanted. Our brain on the drug of social media isn't a brain that's sustainable. One way to know if the infinite scroll has trapped you in its fangs is by tracking the 3 C's. The first is control. Are you able to control your consumption and retain a sense of autonomy over your decisions when it comes to phone and social media use? The next is compulsion. Do you feel yourself regularly reaching for your phone, aimlessly scrolling just to feel like your mood is regulated? Have you become dependent on it to feel normal? And the third C is consequences. Are you suffering consequences in your actual life because of your social media use? Have you isolated yourself from friends and family or noticed emerging struggles with your mental health? If any of the C's apply to you, then it might be time to reassess your relationship with the infinite scroll. Even Aza Raskin says his goal was to create a seamless user experience, but he didn't foresee the consequences. He admits that the goal of the infinite scroll wasn't to help the user, but to keep the user online for as long as possible. He also acknowledges its contribution to rising rates of social media and smartphone addiction. "I regret that I didn't think more about how this thing would be used," he told London-based The Times in 2019. Like many of us, Raskin senses the dangers of the infinite scroll, and there's a lot of them. Endless content on social media reinforces negative thoughts and feelings. If we feel depressed or anxious, we have a tendency to seek out news or information that will confirm those feelings, leaving us in a harmful cycle of negative reinforcement. It can also worsen any existing mental health struggles we're having, whether it's other people's cute photos with their partner that make us jealous, or someone expressing their own sadness that reminds us of our own, or a clickbait post filled with anger. We're susceptible to falling deeper down the hole we're already trying to climb out of. These symptoms might include panic or worry, especially when it comes to the way we consume news on social media. Scrolling through catastrophe after catastrophe and hot take after hot take leads to a dark rumination of how upsetting the world is. Yes, sometimes positivity makes it to your feed, but we all know that negative and extreme content is what gets clicks. Once this sets in, you might notice that you struggle with sleeping. So many of us scroll and scroll right before bed, even though we know it's not good for us. We sit slack-jawed, our faces illuminated by the screen a few inches away from our eyes, sinking deeper and deeper into the depths of content, and without us even knowing, this can increase our anxiety at the very exact time we're supposed to be relaxing. Poor sleep can in turn increase stress and other mental health issues, so even if the content itself isn't upsetting you, the mere fact of looking at it before you go to bed can have adverse effects. Not to mention that an endless supply of information presents us with so many conflicting ideas, moods, and advice that we're left uneasy when we do manage to put down our devices. There are very many opinions in the world, and to try and understand them in bite-sized servings on social media is a recipe for confusion and anxiety. Even as some sites have taken measures to reduce false news posts, it isn't always about whether the information is true or not, it's that there's so much of it. We're forced to wade through a sea of opinions, ideas, facts, lies, and perspectives, and it's impossible to sort out what we actually believe. If you take a step back from the infinite scroll of information and think about your own values outside of what everyone on the internet is saying, you probably could come up with a pretty good line of reasoning. But the moment you throw other people's posts into the mix, your independent mind is shut off. The irony is that we know it's bad for us. We scroll through articles about how we can't stop scrolling. You're watching a video on one now. We don't sit down and think, I'm gonna spend 30 minutes on Instagram right now. We sit down to watch one video or search for one thing, and then you just don't really stop. The Harvard Business Review conducted a study in 2022 with 6,445 US students and working adults and identified 3 factors influencing whether people choose to keep looking at content rather than switch to another activity. The first was the amount of media already viewed. Would the rabbit hole grow stronger once people already viewed a lot of content? In theory, one might think that if you watch a bunch of videos, you'll become bored, but the opposite is true. In the study, those who watched 5 videos instead of 1 were 10% more likely to watch more. Another factor that keeps us hooked is the similarity of the media we view. When presented with the option of watching more videos on the same topic as the ones they'd already watched, participants were 21% more likely to stick with these related videos than the participants who were told they could watch videos on another topic. Lastly, a deciding factor in addition to the content consumption is how we view that content. Unsurprisingly, uninterrupted video consumption made users 22% more likely to watch another video than those who had alternated between work tasks and videos. The infinite scroll holds the key to all 3 of these factors. They all increase with media accessibility and repetition. When something feels accessible, it becomes easier to process, and we anticipate that we'll enjoy it more. That's dopamine at work. Even if going down that content rabbit hole is at odds with what we actually want to be doing, we just can't help ourselves. The apps we use are in the driver's seat. They're designed to trap users in an infinite supply of content, making it easy to consume several posts and videos in a row, suggesting similar content and automatically start playing the next video without interruption. They fit all of the criteria to keep us addicted and away from our real lives. There's a lot of discussion in recent years about flow state. A flow state happens when we're immersed in an action that's both rewarding and challenging at the same time. All the while, we feel a sense of flow that keeps us engaged. Usually the flow is a good thing. It might help us stay fit or creative, or it can be the key to staying on task with work. However, regarding social media, the flow state is not where we want to live. A 2023 Baylor University study looked at 200 Instagram and TikTok users over the age of 18 and measured their time spent on the apps. They were asked about 5 aspects of their experience, specifically focused attention, enjoyment, curiosity, telepresence, and time distortion. All of these elements we want to achieve if we're finding a flow state, but the study found that they also exist when we use social media. If we are so immersed in content that we can't step out of it and redirect our attention, then we're in trouble. The invention and proliferation of the infinite scroll have not only made us addicted to our devices, but they've also swelled into real danger in the world around us. You can look at the global political landscape. When social media became a major part of political organizing, fundraising, and commentary, we were siloed into echo chambers that reaffirmed our pre-existing views. We also began the aptly named doom scrolling obsessively, looking for the most enraging, distressing posts that would work us into a frenzy, and the trend hasn't slowed down. Endless scrolling makes it impossible to step away from the bad news, and this tendency to continue looking at something that upsets us can have physical and mental effects. At no point in modern history was doom scrolling more pervasive than during the height of COVID. We were confronted with bad news every single day, which dug us deeper into our own echo chambers and turned us against one another from the isolation of our own homes. While COVID was undoubtedly a dangerous and dark time for the planet, the feelings of dread and living on high alert have lingered. Constant doom scrolling can develop into obsessively checking the news or looking for a post that might trigger our anxieties because we think it will alleviate our emotional distress, but the exact opposite is true. A constant flow of news and information interferes with other aspects of our lives. A 2022 Texas Tech study assessed people with problematic online consumption levels and found that 74% reported mental health problems and 61% experienced physical problems. The positive side of social media is that it can open our eyes to people and ideas that we wouldn't otherwise know existed. And it shouldn't be discounted. Our habit of consumption, which has grown over the last decade, but really swelled in the last 5 years, has not been the eye-opening experience that one might hope for. Instead, it has turned us into obsessive consumers who are slaves to an algorithm that very rarely fulfills the promise of introducing us to concepts that don't solidify our previously held beliefs. We have become detached from actual life, ignorant of our physical neighbors in favor of the people we see 45 minutes deep into a TikTok rabbit hole. We aren't just addicted to scrolling through social media, we're addicted to the ideas and people we find there, and the safety of what we think they provide. While seeking out like-minded individuals on the internet might seem like it would only bolster our self-confidence, we know that's not the case. Self-esteem has plummeted as we find ourselves chasing likes, views, and comments to make us feel good and worthy. Everyone knows that every Instagram post isn't the reality of someone's life, but it is pretty hard to keep that in mind when you are endlessly scrolling through bodies you wish you had or vacations you wish you were on. Logic just disappears when our impulsive reaction to the content we see takes over. Infinite scrolling rewards us for that reaction. The technology, together with our brain's reward system, sees us engaging with posts and features that ultimately don't make us feel very good and pushes more of it on us. People aren't always out there trying to make you feel bad, but it is one of the side effects of the mere concept of social media. Everybody's putting their best foot forward, or at least only sharing a snippet of their own reality, and as we keep scrolling, we can't help but think, I wish I had that. Yet again, our attention is the only thing the platform cares about, not our emotional well-being. Nowhere is the struggle with self-esteem and emotional distress more poignant than when it comes to social media's effect on young people. In 2023, the US Surgeon General put out an advisory about the effects of social media on youth mental health. He stated that although there's benefits of social media for younger users, there's not enough evidence that, overall, these platforms are safe for children. In fact, there's growing evidence that social media use is a major contributor to the youth mental health crisis in America. The American Psychological Association also issued a health advisory in 2023 on the dangers of social media for adolescents. By 2024, it lamented that no meaningful changes to social media platforms had been adopted and no federal policies had been enacted. These platforms, it argues, aren't inherently built for youth consumption. Young people require special protection due to their unique developmental vulnerabilities through childhood and continuing into their teenage and late adolescent years. These vulnerabilities are compounded if a young person is already experiencing psychological or physical challenges. Our brain's development from about the age of 10 until our mid-20s is linked with hypersensitivity to social feedback. We become especially invested in behaviors that will get us personalized feedback, praise, or attention from our peers. We all remember that inexplicable feeling in our formative years of just wanting to fit in, of being so aware of our social surroundings to the point that we're obsessed over it. But it's not just the playground or the cafeteria that presents these types of social pressures anymore. Social media's algorithms can present content that can be overly influential to young people and very hard to resist at an early age. It's as if the school bully is waiting around every corner to remind you of your perceived flaws and is constantly screaming in your ear. Since social media platforms prioritize engagement, young people are destined to see more and more content that drags them down instead of lifts them up. The struggles with self-esteem and social media addiction that adults feel are present in young people in a much stronger, more insidious way. Likes and follower counts activate regions of the brain that trigger repetitive behavior. This trigger has a greater influence on a younger person's attitudes than an adult's because they are more sensitive to both positive feedback and rejection. Young people have underdeveloped impulse control, so their ability to understand this trigger and reason their way out of this repetitive behavior is limited. When we're young, our cortical system, which is in charge of functions like reasoning, problem solving, and emotional regulation, is still developing. We are less capable of stopping behavior that leads to a temporary benefit, despite negative long-term consequences. Think about the school-aged individuals in your life. It's pretty obvious they make their decisions on a short-term basis, and it's not a bad thing, it's just called being a kid. But infinite scrolling is risky for youth because their ability to monitor and stop engagement on social media is more limited. That difficulty disengaging leads to higher rates of symptoms of dependency. Young people need boundaries, and the very definition of the infinite scroll is that there are none. Without boundaries, and with endless digital clutter barraging them almost every minute of the day, the minds we depend on to keep the world around us on track in the future are being robbed of the skills needed to do just that. There have been lawsuits filed across the United States against companies like Google, the owner of YouTube, Snap Incorporated, which owns Snapchat, and Meta, which calls the shots for Facebook, arguing that social media isn't safe for the youth and attempting to hold these companies accountable. But with non-stop access around, no matter where you are, it's very hard for any of these lawsuits to do anything at all. And we can assume that the companies behind the platforms don't really want to do anything about it either. The Googles and the Metas of the world that benefit from the addictive nature of infinite scrolling are designed for profit. They are businesses. They are there to capitalize on our attention, and the attention of young people has proven very valuable. In 2023, social media companies made over $11 billion in ad revenue just from marketing to minors. A 2023 study from Harvard School of Public Health cited the need for government regulation of social media companies since they stand to make so much money from children and are clearly unable to self-regulate. The study argues that regulations and additional transparency could alleviate some of the harm to youth mental health. Of course, these companies aren't the first to advertise to children, but online ads are especially insidious for kids because they have a harder time telling the difference between an ad and organic content. Now, whether it's kids, their teachers, their grandparents, or their siblings, everyone is the product. The transaction in our use of social media isn't us receiving enjoyment from the platform, it's that the media company is renting our attention to advertisers. This is obvious in television, but much more veiled as we scroll endlessly from a table at a coffee shop or waiting in line at the bank. The more we scroll, the more ads we see, and most importantly, the more information the platform can gather about what we like and what we don't like. This allows the algorithm to feed us the ads we're most likely to engage with. This propels companies and businesses to buy more ad space on platforms because of the sheer targeted data these platforms can offer. This cycle is happening, and we are a part of it, and we are being used. The ancient Egyptians who created the first scrolls would probably look at the evolution of their creation with confusion and possibly judgment. Ancient scrolls were the first kind of editable media, and were also a staple of Asian culture for centuries. They're still used as a medium by fine artists today. In traditional Chinese art, there were two types of scrolls, a hanging scroll and a hand scroll. A hanging scroll was displayed on the wall for long periods of time, like we might see now in a museum. But a hand scroll was kept rolled up until the time for viewing, when the owner would get it out of its ornate storage box and ceremoniously unfurl it. These Chinese scrolls share some interesting similarities to modern-day social media. An individual would experience the unfurling like a panorama, seeing different pieces of the painting as it was revealed like a tracking shot in a film. The social dynamics of these hand scrolls were reflected in the papers included on either end, where owners and viewers would write clever commentary about the content. This was an opportunity to improve the painting, and occasionally intellectuals within the literary class would joke that they felt pressure to write something good. This concept made the artwork a continued collaboration across time, a social experience. However, we shouldn't romanticize our use of social media too much, because the dimensions of the ancient scrolls were finite. The social context around them was intimate, and the consumption of them was very intentional. They cultivated a sustained curiosity from their audience. The current idea of scrolling gives the appearance of constant abundance, so much so that we don't even recognize or digest most of what we swipe past. Yet, for some reason, the infinite amount of knowledge and ideas that make us feel like we know everything just because we scroll past it. We could learn a thing or two from these ancient hand scrolls that preach deference to what we do not know. So the question is, can we fix it? Has the infinite scroll really ruined us forever? The Center for Humane Technology, an institution based in San Francisco and co-founded by a former Google employee named Tristan Harris, has tried to warn the world that the digital revolution has made us addicted to likes, retweets, and online validation. In turn, we've become more depressed and distracted than ever. It also suggests that if the infinite scroll went away, we would be able to incentivize living and embrace fewer online interactions. We'd have time for more contemplation and context with limited amounts of content available, and we could support smaller online and real-life communities instead of seemingly having the entire world at our fingertips. Recent calls like these for calm technology support devices that don't capitalize on our dopamine response. They push ideas like the cozy web, a mass space of social media abandoned and replaced with smaller, invitation-only chats and forums. The problem, proponents of these ideas say, is not the user, but capitalism. Decentralized and community-owned platforms could be a path forward and channel some of the ideas we saw centuries ago around ancient hand scrolls with their consumption and collaboration. It's not a totally outlandish idea, as we see more and more people walking away from social media. Some who have abandoned it don't even crave an alternative, proving that the addiction isn't really to the product, but to our own neurological responses to it. The most mindful type of scrolling simply isn't scrolling. The infinite scroll might still become the simplest gesture in the history of humankind to bring society to its knees. Take it from its creator, Asa Raskin, who said, "This is a profound moment in our species. We are losing control of the tools we made." One of the main reasons why infinite scrolling works so well is because of how easy it is. Humans naturally follow the path of least resistance, so when it takes just one click to open TikTok and immediately be served with an endless stream of content, it becomes irresistible to us. But what if you could reduce the friction it took to do other more productive things like learning? That's what Brilliant.org, the sponsor of today's episode, is doing. Brilliant is a platform that allows you to learn by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons in math, data analysis, programming, and AI. I love Brilliant and have been using it for years because of how easy it is to start learning. Thanks to their amazing mobile app and short, fun lessons, you can learn anywhere and in any short amount of time you have. Whether you're diving into a new topic or just doing a quick practice lesson, you can level up in just a few minutes, right there on your phone. This is what I spent time doing when I would have otherwise been doom scrolling on TikTok. And it's not just easy to use, Brilliant as a learning platform is also designed to be uniquely effective. Their first principles approach helps you build understanding from the ground up. Each lesson is filled with hands-on problem solving that lets you play with concepts, a method proven to be 6 times more effective than just watching lecture videos. Plus, all content on Brilliant is crafted by an award-winning team of teachers, researchers, and professionals from MIT, Caltech, Duke, Microsoft, Google, and more. I recently took their How Large Language Models Works course, and it taught me the principles behind how large language models work, like ChatGPT. To try this or any other course Brilliant has to offer for free for 30 days, visit brilliant.org/aperture or scan the QR code on screen. Or you can click the link in the description, whatever you want. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription, which unlocks every single course Brilliant has to offer. The tech that runs the internet is bad, but what makes it worse is the companies that have taken advantage of it to create platforms that promote dangerous, degenerate, and downright criminal behaviors at the expense of their users, just so they can make the most amount of money possible. All of your favorite social media apps fall into this category. In June 2019, Kirsten Muller-Wahl, a psychiatrist at Hanover Medical School and head of its Tourette's outpatient department, noticed unusual symptoms in her new set of patients. To begin with, all of them were teenagers, and they were suffering from sudden and uncontrollable tics. Even though none of them had any history of the condition, they were all shouting different kinds of obscenities. Muller-Wahl consulted her tight-knit group of global Tourette researchers and found out that her newest patients were not unique. It seemed that a shift in patients and symptoms was happening all over the world, and what was even more surprising was that it was happening at the same time. But what really puzzled Muller-Wahl was that most were repeatedly shouting the same phrase: "You are ugly." As it turned out, this phrase was the key to understanding this strange spike in cases. 4 months before the mysterious global outbreak, a 20-year-old German suffering from Tourette's named Jim Zimmerman launched a YouTube channel and a TikTok page detailing what it's like to live with his condition. He immediately became a social media sensation, gathering more than 2 million subscribers on YouTube and millions of views on TikTok, where he shows his viewers how his condition can force him to blurt obscene words or experience uncontrollable tics and convulsions. Zimmerman had the tendency to blurt out the phrase, "You are ugly," one that he shared with all new-style patients suddenly appearing all over the world. After making this connection, researchers found that all the patients who suddenly claimed to have tics were also fans of Zimmerman. When Muller-Wahl confronted her distressed patients and told them that none of them actually had Tourette's, most of them recovered immediately. But despite their recoveries, this case presented researchers with an unprecedented psychological mystery, showing how imagined symptoms can spread purely from TikTok videos. While these teenagers didn't suffer from Zimmerman's condition, something triggered their minds to believe that they did, and all of a sudden, all of them simultaneously and independently developed these TikTok tics. With TikTok becoming one of the most used social media apps today, it's becoming even more important to consider. Could TikTok be causing a mass psychosis? Mass psychogenic illness, or MPI, also known as mass sociogenic illness, is a real occurrence where a group of people starts feeling real physical symptoms at the same time, even though there's no physical or environmental reason for them to be sick. The dancing plagues of the Middle Ages were probably the most bizarre form of MPI. In July 1518, residents of the city Strasbourg were struck by an uncontrollable urge to dance. It started with one woman stepping into the street and dancing for nearly a week before she was joined by 36 others who also seemed to have the same uncontrollable urge. The town then hired musicians to provide backing music, which only worsened the situation as more people joined in. It wasn't long before the marathon started to take its toll. By August, the dancing plague had 400 people in its clutches, with 100 of them dancing themselves to death. More recent but less dramatic cases include a boarding school in Mexico, where a student developed leg pain and paralysis. Soon after, hundreds of their schoolmates began experiencing the same symptoms. In East Africa, 3 girls who started laughing uncontrollably managed to infect over 100 other students, forcing their school to close down. The triggers for mass psychogenic illnesses cannot be entirely isolated, but they can easily spread among people who share the same anxieties, fears, and sense of community. This is what makes the TikTok tics an even more intriguing study. TikTok rapidly gained popularity during the pandemic as a trendy dance video and crazy challenge app. But since then, it has established itself as the world's most popular app, with nearly 3 times as many users as Twitter. A recent study even found that it has dethroned Google as the most popular domain in 2021, with most of its visitors using the app as a primary search and discovery platform. With over 1 billion active monthly users who spend an average of 95 minutes a day using the app, it has become more important than ever to understand what kind of effects TikTok has on our brains. While the effects of social media on our mental state have been a topic of debate for the past decade, the emergence of TikTok is different. It allows users to watch an unlimited stream of new content, observe trends rise and fall daily, and find something new with each swipe. Because the videos are often extremely short, the user can quickly decide whether to continue watching or move on to something more interesting. This constant stream of information can narrow and exhaust our attention span over time, limit our concentration, and affect our short-term memory. TikTok places a constant focus for content to be delivered in 60 seconds or less, making anything longer feel like it's a waste of our time. Some users have reported that they don't even have the patience to watch 10-minute videos on YouTube anymore, even when the topic interests them. This reduction in our attention spans can come from a variety of risk factors, such as poor academic performance, communication struggles, social isolation, relationship difficulties, stress, and anxiety. A recent study conducted by Curtin University in Australia has shown that the heavy use of social media can lead to problematic mental health consequences, especially for people with lower attention spans, which brings us back to the TikTok tics. This curious Tourette's case was the first form of social media-induced sociogenic illness. In addition to the teenagers in Germany, about 50 patients across the globe presented the same symptoms, which demonstrates the domino effect of our social media landscape. Constant exposure can lead to low attention spans in those that never had the issue before, which can lead to psychological illnesses, which can, in turn, spread imagined conditions around the world, in a way that we never even dreamt of before the age of the internet. According to TikTok, videos tagged with the hashtag Tourette's have been viewed more than 5 billion times. The unexpected appeal of these videos among teenagers can be attributed to a need to stand out or be different. But the truth is, videos like these also provide a sense of community, acceptance, sympathy, and validation, which all seem to be present in patients suffering from MPI. Even though Zimmerman's intentions were to show his followers what it's like living with Tourette's, it also validated violating social conventions and gave proof to young, impressionable viewers that the more disruptive you are, the more viral you'll go. This is the basic concept behind TikTok. The whole idea is to promote videos that can go viral in an instant and push young content creators to produce similar content. That's why the first thing you see when you open the app is the For You page, where short videos that are carefully selected to grab your attention are displayed. It's why the video's on autoplay and shown in an endless scroll, and there's no signalization of progress or duration of the experience. All these features are intentionally designed to grab and keep the attention of young users for as long as possible, and urge them to create similar content if they want to get that attention for themselves.
In a recent interview, comedian Andrew Scholes talked about how TikTok's algorithm promotes useless content in the West, but shows entirely different content centered around innovation, architecture, and science in China. Like Scholes, many argue that TikTok is intentionally making people dumb by manipulating user behavior and pushing mindless content on its impressionable young viewers. To that point, TikTok trends have included things like the blackout challenge, where children were tasked with holding their breath until they fainted, the penny challenge, encouraging kids to push pennies behind partially plugged phone chargers, which could have dangerous results, and the tooth file challenge, where young users were causing permanent damage to their teeth just for some of that desired attention. The more these videos went viral, the more content creators saw it as an opportunity to gain traction on the platform. This in itself feeds the vicious cycle of harmful content that leads to illnesses similar to the TikTok tics and other mental disorders. Today, TikTok is being looked at in a number of US states to determine its influence on its young users' mental health. According to Dr. David Barnhart, clinical mental health counselor at Behavioral Sciences of Alabama, all social media platforms impact how a person views themselves, but because of TikTok's rapid-fire influx of content, users are exposed to dozens of videos within minutes, which makes the effect much more devastating than other platforms. Users can easily become addicted to the app and may seek constant stimulation as a result. This constant stimulation increases stress and anxiety levels, especially with numerous videos that fuel body dissatisfaction, appearance-related anxiety, and much more. Mental health professionals have reported seeing a number of younger patients who spend considerable time on TikTok, claiming to have severe mental health conditions such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And the main issue with such claims is that more exposure to targeted content can influence teenagers to misdiagnose themselves with a mental illness without consulting a professional, only because they can relate to some of the symptoms of a TikTok influencer they follow. Just like the TikTok tics case, young adults who self-diagnose can also do so from a desire to feel like they're part of a community, or to rebel against social constructs, and in the process, they can genuinely believe that they suffer from a specific illness, even when they don't. The flip side to all of this is that there are several positives that can come from highlighting mental health issues online. The sense of community, which can be harmful in some cases, can also be helpful in normalizing these conditions and sending the message that people aren't alone. Young people suffering from their own issues can come together and support each other with helpful tips on how to deal with depression, anxiety, and other hurdles in their daily life. Videos discussing mental health get millions of views on TikTok every day and draw people to symptoms that some people may not have realized were an issue. This can spur people into action and encourage them to seek help. As with all things, there are positives and negatives, which is why experts don't believe that deleting TikTok is the answer. Instead, regulating and monitoring the time spent on the app is key. Otherwise, the social media-fueled mental health crisis is only going to get worse. The age of the internet has definitely brought out a whole new dimension of concerns that we should worry about, but TikTok itself has changed the online world. It's a cultural phenomenon with a superior algorithm that is unmatched by its social media rivals. It's built to ruthlessly and aggressively collect your data, and constantly feed you content that's for you. Content that could change the direction of your life, warp your perceptions of the world around you, and even cause mass psychogenic illnesses worldwide. MPIs have existed for hundreds of years, and yet a lot of the reasons why they happen remain a mystery. But what we can learn from the TikTok tics case is that we're now entering a new era of social media-induced sociogenic psychosis, and apps like TikTok have more control and power over our youth than we thought. The best predictor of future behavior is previous behavior, and based on what we already know, we've most likely not seen the last of social media-induced psychological illnesses. For now, at least you had the patience to watch this entire video. Thanks for not swiping to check out the latest escalator dance clips or watch a guy deep cleaning a horse's hoof. TikTok is far more dangerous than we thought. In the past 2 years, at least 15 kids, aged 12 or younger, across the globe from Milwaukee to Sicily, have painfully passed on after attempting what seemed to them like a harmless challenge they found on the world's most popular app, TikTok. The Blackout Challenge encourages users to record holding their breath until they passed out, and viewers could, essentially, watch as they regained consciousness. Despite the fact that this is obviously dangerous for anyone on the planet, in the hands of children, the trend had far more devastating consequences. The NyQuil Challenge, Penny Challenge, the Milk Crate Challenge. Time after time, we've seen TikTok spring up one dangerous viral trend after another, all of which puts users, especially younger users, in potential serious danger. In a previous Aperture episode, we looked at the mental health effects of TikTok, but it seems as though the self-inflicted risks directly linked to the app are more far-reaching and have greater consequences than we could have ever imagined. From health and safety to privacy and security, given the long list of problems that TikTok seems to pose to the general public, what do we do? What can we do? Can we fix TikTok, or should we just ban the app entirely? If you've opened TikTok, you'll find its genius upon first glance. An endless stream of content from strangers all across the globe curated specifically for you by one of the most refined algorithms humanity has ever created. You get a rush of dopamine from watching dogs do dances to amateur chefs making elaborate meals. Before we look at just how dangerous TikTok has become, I think it's important for me to mention that it's definitely not all bad. TikTok's rise to the top was greatly accelerated during the pandemic. Everyone was forced to stay indoors without physical access to their friends, family, or community. To help us find a way to connect, young people flocked to TikTok, doing silly dances and challenges to cure their boredom and help them feel part of a community again. They found solace in an app, from doctors explaining COVID symptoms people were experiencing to a random comment saving people from potentially life-threatening conditions. Whether you got bullied at school or you were living in an unhappy home, you could log onto the app and see other people in the same exact situation as you, offering help, support, and a sense of belonging. Sadly, the reality, as with most things, is that there's far more than meets the eye. Just spend a few minutes on the app and instantly you can see just how difficult, almost impossible it is to leave. Today's people spend more time there than they do on any other social media platform, with a global average of 96 minutes per day. And for some, the number is far greater than that. This, for anyone, is just way too much time on just one app, but it's even worse when you realize that around half of TikTok's users are young people, many of whom are below the age of 13. Creators and users who try to destigmatize mental health on the app see the benefits of more people learning and talking about these issues. Isn't that only the case, though, if users are getting the right information? One of the greatest problems on TikTok is that just about anyone can buy a scrub on Amazon and claim to be a doctor, spreading misinformation with ease. There's no formal fact-checking, so often we might just hear what we want to hear. If we have a symptom we're worried about, these videos could have the WebMD effect of making us think we're dying when we're really just having mild allergies. When you think about it like that, you realize that the videos pushed to us by TikTok can actually worsen what we're feeling. If we're anxious about a relationship or a meeting at work and we're continually getting shown videos of other anxious people, is that going to help us feel better or make us spiral? All of these issues are without mentioning the things that plague every social media app, like cyberbullying, social exclusion, or the temptation to compare ourselves to others. We get addicted to scrolling and posting and scrolling and posting and scrolling until we're convinced that we're just not as good as everyone else. The scariest thing about it is that no one is immune to the grasp of the algorithm, not even those who should be better informed. One doctor, Brian Boxer-Wackler, grew an impressive TikTok following by offering medical advice and reaching to other health-related videos. Knowing his audience, he became fluent in Gen Z slang to be more relatable, despite being middle-aged. He became so obsessed with growing his following that his family had to stage an intervention to help him curb his addiction and approach his channel as a healthy distraction rather than an obsession.
It was unbelievable when you wake up and you see your video got hundreds of thousands or millions of views. It's just this rush. Those are real effects. I mean, those are the same effects that people get with drugs.
In late 2022, he released a book detailing his experiences with social media addiction. Creators have to produce new videos all the time to maintain view counts. The pressure and the burnout that comes with it is real no matter what your age, education level, or IQ score. In that sense, TikTok is a great democratizer of our time, but with debilitating side effects. Seeing all the dangers of TikTok, the big question remains, is this fixable? Is there a way to combat all those dopamine hits we feel every time we open the app? The problem is that the app wants us to be addicted. That's how it keeps users, increases downloads, and stays relevant. We can put restrictions on our screen time or make our phones require breaks from the app as much as we want, but if the app doesn't change, chances are that we won't either. And for most people, that's okay. They might obsess over the latest TikTok dance or unfairly compare themselves to a beauty influencer, but they'll be fine. Their life won't be dramatically altered. But for kids, the potential damage is much higher. TikTok took down 41 million underage accounts in the first half of 2022 alone, but that's a fool's errand. Those users can just sign up again with a different account. TikTok's army of 40,000 global moderators review potentially harmful videos, but it's an impossible task to catch everything. Over 1 billion videos are viewed on the app every single day. That means each mod will have to review 25,000 videos and let's say the videos average out to around a minute each, that's still 416 hours of content to watch in 24 hours. It's literally impossible. So how do we protect kids? There's no effective way to block underage users from social media platforms because it's impossible to verify their age. But what if it wasn't? In 2021, TikTok met with providers of facial age estimation software, which can distinguish between a child and a teen and can work without directly identifying an individual or storing any data. This could be a game changer for an app that's trying to be safer for children, but unfortunately child safety isn't the only scandal swirling around TikTok. Facial recognition technology on an app that's been accused of spying on its users and sharing data with the government wouldn't be a great look. We can't really talk about TikTok in today's world without talking about privacy. Most of us know and ignorantly accept that our data is being stored, seen, and used in some way when we surf the internet. It's the classic accept all cookies option without thinking. But is TikTok and its parent company ByteDance taking it to a new level? An internal investigation found that a group of ByteDance employees was found to be surveilling several US journalists who covered the app in an attempt to track potential anonymous sources. In 2020, a security update on the iPhone caught TikTok tracking the keystrokes of Apple users while on the app. But here's the thing, ByteDance isn't the first company to be accused of this. Uber and Facebook have been known to track the location of journalists who report on their apps, just like TikTok employees were found to be doing. And in more than 124,000 documents leaked to the press in 2022, spanning 2014 to 2017, Uber was shown to be doing everything it could to bypass regulations across the globe. Meta, Twitter, Google, and even Apple all collect and use our personal data in some way. So what's the big issue with ByteDance? Geopolitics. ByteDance is a Chinese company. TikTok says that it doesn't share user data with the Chinese government, but politicians, journalists, and other critics are quick to call a bluff. China already has a practice of stealing massive quantities of data about Americans and other governments, but do TikTok and its billions of user profiles offer a more direct line? If the security concerns turn out to be true, we might see widespread fraud, hacking, or influence operations launched through the platform. As a result, United States lawmakers have issued warnings about the app and enacted executive orders to address the potential security risks it poses. Calls from inside the US Congress have, in a feat of modern-day politics, brought Republicans and Democrats together against a common enemy. Closed-doors talk between TikTok executives and the Committee on Foreign Investment in the US have been going on for years. There's a security contact in negotiations with the Treasury Department on how TikTok will handle Americans' user data. All of this in an effort to fix things, to curb the threat, to limit our exposure as users. But will it work? Many think that contracts, talks, and hearings won't get the job done, that fixing just isn't an option. The calls to ban TikTok in the United States and many other countries grow by the day. The US military banned the app in 2019. Now, TikTok is off limits on all government devices, and there's a bill sitting in Congress to prohibit it completely. Take a second to think what that would look like. The most popular app in the world unavailable in the United States. Would there be revolts, cheers, confusion, a restructuring of society as we know it? To understand what life post-TikTok could be like, look no further than China's neighbor, India. The East Asian country banned TikTok in 2020 after a geopolitical dispute with China. Of course there are consequences. People employed by TikTok in India lost their jobs. Influencers who had massed followings on the app lost their income. But it wasn't all bad in India. In fact, it was surprisingly good for many of its citizens. Replacement apps developed in India are hoping to fill the hole that TikTok's departure created, with the hopes of focusing on the needs of its users rather than doing whatever it takes to fulfill business objectives. If India does this well, will other countries follow suit? For now, we can't really say for sure. As for US national security, there's no smoking gun, no evidence of an urgent threat. This begs the question, is all the discussion by politicians and regulators really about a unique national security issue, or is it a way for them to talk about larger issues like privacy, disinformation, and content moderation that help bolster their own personal gains platforms? Despite any ulterior motives, the potential for danger seems to be enough to at least keep conversations about partial or full bans of the app going. And you don't even need to look through a globalized lens to understand that there's harmful aspects to TikTok. Remember the kids who suffered a terrible fate attempting the blackout challenge they were never supposed to see in the first place? The reality is that technology is always one step ahead of us, our governments, and our ability to maintain our mental health. And as long as there's money to be made, it won't slow down. Because users aren't customers, we're the product, something to be sold and analyzed in the name of financial gain. If measures like enforcing age restrictions to make an app safer aren't in the interest of a company's bottom line, why would they ever enact them? So can we fix TikTok, or should we just get rid of it? The app is making small efforts to fix itself, adding new features like one that tells users why the algorithm recommends certain videos, but the algorithm is designed to keep people watching for as long as possible, so it promotes the most extreme, the most controversial, the most eye-catching videos, and even if you know why you're watching a video, will it really change the way the video makes you feel or act? TikTok could try a route such as YouTube took with YouTube Kids to protect its youngest users. It's a version of the platform designed for children 12 and under that hosts age-appropriate videos and screen time limits. As for our privacy and security, perhaps it's up to the government of the world to place restrictions on what information about its citizens a foreign body has access to. Or if a full ban of the world's most popular app is in our future to protect us, our mental health, and the safety of our homes, those 96 minutes on average that we spend every day on TikTok would have to go towards something else. I would encourage us all to focus that time on something more productive, because the reality is a world without TikTok will still have other platforms that embrace the blistering pace and addictive nature of short-form content. Things being lit on fire, flash mobs performing goofy choreographed dances, and people eating too much pizza on camera. In fact, right now, there's already YouTube Shorts, Instagram, and Facebook Reels, so we better watch out. We've talked extensively about the dangers of TikTok, but what if I told you that Snapchat was way more dangerous? That while TikTok's influence is more subtle and psychological, Snapchat puts young people at immediate, sometimes life-threatening, risk. On the 2nd of October 2016, 5 men broke into Kim Kardashian West's apartment in Paris and robbed her at gunpoint. The masked men made away with around $10 million worth of jewelry. Luckily, Kim was left unharmed. In an interview with Vice, Eunice Abbas, a member of the infamous Grandpa Robbers gang who allegedly robbed the reality star, said they used Snapchat to figure out everything they needed to know about the operation, where she was, how much jewelry she had with her, and the fact that she was alone in her apartment at the time. Kim had posted a Snapchat story about how she was home, but everyone else was going out, informing the robbers of the perfect opportunity to strike. Since that incident, other criminals have taken to Snapchat to find and rob people in a similar fashion. Now, you might think you're more careful and that you don't give away personal information on your Snapchat stories, but the reality is, even little things like an address on the package you're opening on screen or the number plate of your car can give criminals so much information about you. This is a big problem on every social media platform, but the unique challenge with Snapchat, unlike the other apps, is that it sells you a false sense of security with its supposed privacy features. If you believe that everything you share on the app is temporary, you're more likely to share things without giving them much thought, and this is what leads to many of the issues plaguing the app today. To understand how Snapchat's false sense of security negatively affects its users, we have to go back to the very beginning. Reggie Brown was allegedly talking about sexting with some friends when he came up with the idea of a social media app that allowed users to share pictures that disappeared after a few seconds for obvious reasons. Brown would then share this idea with his friends Evan Spiegel and Bobby Murphy, and the three of them came together to form Peekaboo. After some shady maneuvers to kick Brown out of the company, Spiegel and Murphy relaunched the app as Snapchat in July 2011. Making the case for Snapchat in the company's first blog post, Spiegel said, "Snapchat isn't about capturing the traditional Kodak moment, it's about communicating with the full range of human emotion, not just what appears to be pretty or perfect. Like when I think I'm good at imitating the face of a star-nosed mole, or if I want to show my friend the girl I have a crush on. It would be awkward if that got around. And when I'm away at college and miss my mom or my friends." But in actuality, everyone knew what Snapchat was for, at least the very core of it, and the company wasn't hiding it. Have a look at Snapchat on a Wayback Machine and you'll see that the company used young, scantily dressed models to market the app. It was a subtle nod to the kinds of images the company felt people would use the app for the most, and people did. The ephemeral nature of the app meant that users could do whatever they wanted without fear that their digital footprint would someday come back to haunt them. But the reality wouldn't be farther from the truth. While Snapchat prevents people from taking screenshots or screen recordings of messages without informing the other party, people have found many easy ways to circumvent this for nefarious purposes. This has led to some horrific experiences for users who thought they were sharing media that would disappear, only to find it all over the internet weeks later with no way of taking it down. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of sites all over the internet dedicated to sharing revenge
that's explicitly sourced from Snapchat. Messages, pictures, and videos that the sender was convinced would disappear, plastered all over the internet. My life has just gone through a down spiral. I'm homeless because of this. I lost my family. These were the words of a victim in the trial of Kevin Bullard, a man who ran one of the infamous sites where these snaps were re-uploaded. You might think that none of this is Snapchat's fault. After all, adults need to be responsible for their own actions and decisions, and to an extent you would be right. But the sad truth is that these issues don't only affect adults. According to Data Reportal, 20% of Snapchat's users, around 123 million people, are between the ages of 13 and 17, all of whom are exposed to the same dangers of the disappearing text and the vulnerability that it presents. The Times UK published an investigation into Snapchat that uncovered thousands of cases of pedophiles using the app to request inappropriate pictures from children and trying to groom young teenagers. Teenagers themselves were also found using the platform to share CP. The self-destructing nature of Snapchat's messages makes it difficult to track the extent of the harm the app has caused and is still causing. The situation became so bad that every day, police in the UK are investigating about 3 new child sexual exploitation cases facilitated on Snapchat. It's for these reasons that the investigation labeled the app a safe haven for child abuse, which is honestly one of the worst reputations a social media platform could ever have. For an app that allows anyone 13 and above to have an account, Snapchat needs to put a lot more measures in place to safeguard its own users, and sadly, not much is being done to that effect. And as if those issues weren't bad enough, in 2017 Snapchat released a feature called Snap Map that allows users to share their live location with friends on the app. On its own, this is already an alarming feature. It saves criminals the trouble of trying to decipher your location through all your posts. All they have to do is make an account, add you as a friend, and once you accept, that's it. They've got everything they need to cause terrible damage. Let's say you're careful not to add people you don't know in real life as friends. SnapMap still gives stalkers the perfect platform to find and follow their victims around. And if shows like You have taught us anything, it's that stalkers are usually closer to you than you think, and way more dangerous than you can imagine. Child molesters, human traffickers, groomers. Think about the fact that all these dangerous people can find the location of young kids in just a few clicks. It's mind-boggling when you consider just how risky it is. So far, we've talked about the unique dangers of using Snapchat, but let's not forget that the app also includes the same problems that most other social media apps suffer from. Things like cyberbullying. The anonymity of the internet has created a safe space for cyberbullies, hate speech, and just vile comments in general. The volatile nature of Snapchat messages makes that problem even worse. People can send the most horrid messages without fear because they know that once the person reads it, there's no receipt. This gives the receiver a memory they can't run away from, and the sender no repercussions for their actions because there's no evidence, unless they screenshot it. Then there's addiction. Figures from the Healthy Journal show that teenagers have an average daily screen time of 8.5 hours. That's more than an entire adult workday spent on social media. To be fair, most of that time is spent on TikTok thanks to its fast-paced content and impressively accurate algorithm, and on other social media platforms like Instagram and even YouTube. But Snapchat has a trick up its sleeve that keeps its users coming back for more: streaks. The record for the longest running Snap streak is currently held by Hannah and Lauren, best friends who have been sending each other a picture or video every single day since the feature was first released on April 6, 2015. If somehow you don't know what they are, Snap streaks form when you and your friends send each other a picture or a video. Within 24 hours for more than 3 consecutive days, it's represented by a fire emoji alongside the number of days you've snapped each other. This creates a huge incentive for people to use the app at least once every 24 hours to keep their streak going. Snapchat uses tricks like this all over the app, like the friend emojis, which add little emojis to users' display pictures to indicate the frequency of interaction between you and them. Like this one, when you and a person have been each other's best friend for 2 months in a row. This one when they're one of your best friends, and this one when your snap streak is ending soon. So you can remember to send that snap, and fast. Features like these create a fear of missing out in users' hearts, which encourages them to stay on the app for as long as possible, even when it might not be healthy to do so. When it's not addiction, there's also the problem of perfectionism. Remember what Spiegel said in that first blog post about Snapchat. It's about communicating with the full range of human emotion, not just what appears to be pretty or perfect. Perhaps this was the company's original plan, but that quickly changed once they launched filters. Research has shown that people who use filters more frequently often experience increased feelings of dissatisfaction with their real selves.
Humans are social animals, and we've always lived and survived in groups, and as a result, we've always compared ourselves to others. Back when we lived in small hunter-gatherer communities, it was fine, but there really aren't many people to compare yourself to, and the need to compare certainly wasn't constantly in your face. Sadly, with the rise of globalization and things like television and magazines becoming more widespread, people started comparing themselves to their favorite celebrities, which in itself was already bad enough. But what happens when people start comparing themselves not to other people, but to a digitally altered version of themselves? Brighter skin, whiter teeth, more symmetrical features, accentuated cheekbones and jawline. Snapchat made all these available to users at the snap of a finger. Pun intended. The result? A 2021 study carried out by the University of London researchers on 175 women and non-binary people between the ages of 18 and 30 found that 94% of participants felt pressure to look a certain way, with over half of them saying the pressure was intense. All of this because their use of filters. We're witnessing a generation of people who no longer are satisfied with how they look in real life, no thanks to how much better filters can make them look. Young people, now more than ever, are considering plastic surgery in order to look more like their filtered selves. It's gotten so common that plastic surgeon Dr. Tijian Esho coined the term Snapchat dysmorphia to explain the phenomenon. Although this video has been pretty critical of the platform, the truth is that Snapchat isn't all terrible. In fact, more than anything, it's a fun messaging app. It helps bridge the gap between Android and iPhone users by providing a universal messaging platform that both the green and blue sides of the world can use. It's also a great way to keep in touch with your friends and family, especially for people who don't see each other often. With snaps, you can easily share bits about your day without overthinking it, because you know the pictures aren't going to live forever. Snapchat is actually the closest digital messaging platform we have to real-world communication. Our interactions with each other and the world around us are fleeting. We may remember the most important conversations, but most of our everyday interactions just fade away, like a snap after 24 hours. Even features like Snap Map allow close friends and family to check up on the whereabouts of one another without any effort. In the case of an emergency, it can be life-saving by giving the authorities immediate access to the location of the victim. What people need to remember, though, is that Snapchat is not impervious to the problems that affect every other social media platform, or even the internet itself. Just like you would on any other platform, be conscious of what you share on Snap and understand that nothing is ever a complete secret. Before you hit that send button, keep in mind that there's a possibility that whatever you send will get out one day. And as a result, you need to be careful with what you share, and more importantly, who you share it with. Don't get bitten by the false sense of impermanence that the app gives. Also, remember to take breaks and don't let features like streaks and friend emojis keep you on the app longer than necessary, because overstimulation could ruin your life. Click the video on your screen right now to find out how and why.
The meme stock trading trend with its Wall Street Bets forum reaching a $10 billion valuation in its latest funding round. The company says it has already raised more than $400 million from Fidelity and plans to raise up to $700 million in total.
In 2021, Reddit was at its peak, valued at around $10 billion. Today, just 2 years later, its valuation has dropped to around $5.5 billion. How did a Silicon Valley unicorn slice its value in half in just 2 years? This is the story of the dramatic rise and fall of Reddit. Often called the front page of the internet, Reddit is one of the most visited websites and consists solely of user-generated content. The site is made up of over 138,000 communities called subreddits that are dedicated to all sorts of topics. Users of the platform, called Redditors, use these communities to post ideas, ask opinions, and share common interests. Have you ever been in a group of people and brought up what you think is the most exciting thing you've ever heard, only to be met with blank stares? What you might consider incredibly fascinating, they couldn't care less about. I'm sure most of us have had this happen to us multiple times. It can be hard to find people we have things in common with. Even our best friends and family will find certain topics we love strange or boring. And that's the beauty of Reddit. No matter how niche, weird, or dull the topic, there's an active community of people having endless discussions about it. At its best, the site emulates casual conversation between friends, which makes sense because it was founded by two friends. University of Virginia roommates Steve Huffman and Alexis Ohanian founded Reddit in 2005, and like many successful entrepreneurs, the idea came after the failure of a previous company. Huffman and Ohanian launched a startup called My Mobile Menu, allowing users to order food via text. This was long before the days of Grubhub and Postmates. After My Mobile Menu failed, they applied the same concept of direct communication to a new idea, one that eventually became Reddit. In just 2006, 1 year after its launch, Reddit was acquired by Condé Nast, one of the largest media companies in the world. Reddit's rise to being the front page of the internet was electric. People who wanted that wide variety of discussions and commentary quickly found a home on Reddit. It became a hub for memes, viral videos, and political activism. Influential bloggers and programmers began using the site to share interesting nuggets and ideas, and soon Reddit became the go-to site for tech-related news. In 2009, Reddit developed its first on-site advertising strategy to generate revenue. The promise of anonymity on the site has always attracted an incredibly diverse community, bringing in a diverse set of advertisers. Since anyone can find something interesting on Reddit, most companies can find a reason to advertise on it. Reddit has always had a unique approach to marketing for brands. Ad options include the sponsor posts, targeted displays, or video ads. Brands can also create their own subreddits for advertising and marketing. If Wonder Bread wanted to talk about how amazing sliced white bread is, they could start a subreddit for bread aficionados, and there probably already is one. Reddit's strategy paid off. In 2014, the company raised $50 million on a $500 million valuation. Over the years and several more rounds of funding, Reddit eventually reached that $10 billion valuation in 2021. It was, as they say in Silicon Valley, a unicorn. Rare to find, but precious to behold. But as Reddit grew its users and advertising revenue, its problems grew as well. One of the first controversies the site was involved in came on the heels of the 2013 Boston Marathon bombings. Users created a subreddit to find the Boston bombers. The moderators of the subreddit, unpaid users to enforce the community's rules, tried to ensure that no one's personal information was posted, but things quickly spiraled out of control. Users wrongly identified suspects in the bombing and never correctly named the people who turned out to be responsible. Notably, they spread the information about a college student named Sunil Tripathi, who went missing right before the bombings. After the actual bombers were arrested, Sunil's body was found in the Providence River, having died by suicide. Not only did Sunil's family have to bear the harassment of their missing son from these Redditors, but both BuzzFeed and NBC News reporters spread unsourced information from the subreddit, giving it legitimate journalistic credibility. Reddit's controversies didn't end there. The platform's always had sexually explicit material, but things went way too far in 2014 when naked photos of celebrities began circulating on different subreddits. And even worse, some of those celebrities were underage at the time. In Reddit's defense, it swooped into action swiftly, identified the photos of minors, and removed them from the platform. Then, a year later, the site banned nude images posted without the subject's consent. This move was a win for everyone. It stopped non-consensual explicit material from being easily accessible on the platform, but allowed adult performers freedom of expression. Not safe for work, or NSFW content as it's now tagged on the platform, wasn't the only thing Reddit had to stop spreading through its communities.
Today, Sony canceled the Christmas Day release of The Interview.
Hackers win. I don't know how else to frame it now that Sony has canceled the release of The Interview, that spoof about North Korea starring James Franco and Seth Rogen.
In 2014, Redditors shared hacked files from Sony Pictures that included copyrighted material. Leaked documents from the Mormon Church have also been shared. Although the company prides itself on anonymity and free speech, in situations like these, it's had to step in and exert control over some subreddits. In 2015, Reddit CEO Steve Huffman made a policy banning several offensive and sexual communities. This included subreddits like Lolicon, which posted sexually explicit animated material featuring children. More bans followed. A subreddit that expressed support for the shooter in the 2015 Charleston church mass shooting was removed. During the 2016 election, a subreddit that pushed the Pizzagate conspiracy theory that Democratic leaders were running a child sex ring was also banned. As American politics grew more divisive, more bans took place. In response to user demand after the protests over George Floyd's murder in 2020, Reddit updated its content policies and introduced rules around hate speech. It then banned around 2,000 subreddits across the political spectrum in violation of these regulations. Some media outlets and political commentators said banning these subreddits violated the freedom of political expression. Then, in 2021, a subreddit called Donald Trump was banned for policy violations and the influence its posts had on those who stormed the Capitol. Moves like this followed on Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok, but were criticized by those who believed it was censorship. It hasn't been all negative for Reddit these past few years. In 2021, Redditors proved how powerful online communities can be with the infamous GameStop short squeeze. Users in a subreddit agreed to buy stock in the suffering company. When they started, shares were selling for $3, and as the price increased because of the Reddit users purchasing the stock, Wall Street traders shorted it, betting it would drop until the company went out of business. But Reddit users shouldn't be underestimated. Within 16 days, they drove the stock up to $347.51, and many of those Wall Street short sellers lost a whole bunch of cash. $6 billion to be exact. This highlighted the power of the Reddit community. Redditors aren't afraid to wield this power when they feel it's necessary, even against the platform they call home. Over the years, a battle between Reddit, the company, and its users has been brewing, and recently it hit a flashpoint. Some of the most critical users on Reddit are the subreddit moderators. These volunteers manage the communities, set and enforce specific rules, and remove posts and comments that violate those rules, and collectively, Reddit moderators do a total of 466 hours of work daily. That's $3.4 million in unpaid labor every year, and that accounts for nearly 3% of the company's annual revenue. Basically, Reddit needs this unpaid labor to survive, so when the moderators fight back on a decision, the company usually listens, but not this time, at least not yet. Reddit announced in April 2023 that it would start charging developers for its API access. In the simplest of terms, an API, or Application Programming Interface, is software that allows two different applications to talk to each other. It's what allows you to log on to different websites using your Apple or Google account. The API allows Google to talk directly to the website and share your personal information with them, so you don't have to create new usernames and input all your information for every single account you use. Some companies allow developers to access their API for free, while others charge for it. Reddit switched from the former to the latter. Reddit's API launched 7 years ago and has always been free. Anyone building an app could request data from Reddit and use that data to develop their app. But since July 1st, 2023, developers have had to pay to use Reddit's API. The affected developers and many Reddit moderators haven't been pleased. In June of 2023, moderators organized a damaging blackout to protest this policy change. The 48-hour blackout, called Red Dark, included 8,500 subreddits that were set to private, meaning no visiting, no posting, no commenting. 6 of the most popular subreddits participated, including gaming, food, and funny, which have over 30 million subscribers each. In total, Red Dark accounted for over 2.5 billion users. And it's happened before. On July 2nd, 2015, a group of moderators participated in a Reddit blackout and temporarily shut down their subreddits. They were protesting the firing of Reddit employee Victoria Taylor, an administrator who helped organize famous Ask Me Anything interviews. This act, known as AMA-geddon, highlighted Reddit moderators' power. But the more recent blackout, in protest of Reddit's decision to start charging third-party developers for access to the site's data, is even worse. CEO Steve Huffman said that charging for API access was meant to keep artificial intelligence from learning Reddit's data for free. But is it really Reddit's data if all the content on the platform is user-generated? There's no definitive answer, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Although Reddit has said that tiny apps with less than 100 requests per minute will still be able to use the free API, and that other exceptions, like accessibility-focused apps, will not have to pay, unfortunately, it's not just big AI companies like OpenAI and Google that are suffering. Apollo was a popular app that enhanced the Reddit browsing experience for iOS users, and because of its popularity, it made over 7 billion data requests a month through Reddit's API. Under the new rules, Apollo would have to pay $20 million a year to use the Reddit API, an impossible number for its developer Christian Selif to pay. As a result, Apollo went dark. The blackout was supposed to end on June 14th, but almost half of the subreddits involved have stayed down indefinitely. Even the moderators who are reopening are making a joke of it to prove a point. The Steam subreddit, originally created for the Steam gaming platform, is now all about Steam engines. The Pix subreddit is comprised solely of photos of comedian and HBO host John Oliver. Some moderators are marking their subreddit NSFW as not safe for work because Reddit can't run ads on NSFW content, while moderators of the famous AMA subreddit say they won't coordinate any more celebrity interviews. But some communities are taking the protests to the extreme and leaving the site entirely for platforms like Kabin and Lemmy. Could this be the end of Reddit as we know it? The blackout has received a ton of media attention, and at one point, Reddit crashed because it couldn't handle so many subreddits going dark at once. Despite the damage, Reddit refuses to change its course on its API policy. Users have claimed that the company is forcing moderators out of their subreddit, which Reddit corporate denies. Reddit announced the API policy change because its current model wasn't sustainable, and it claims it wants to be fairly paid for API access since it costs Reddit money to provide API services. The problem is that this is happening with little to no warning, sending moderators into their collective rampage against the company. Also, in the words of tech creator MKBHD, the number one rule on the internet that's never been successfully broken is to charge for something that was previously free. And it's not just Reddit. Elon Musk has started charging a subscription fee for the verification badge on Twitter, and he also charges for API access, which shut down dozens of third-party apps. Meta too has introduced a paid verification plan, a monthly fee for a better customer service, increased visibility, and the coveted blue checkmark. But aren't they successfully breaking that rule? Because all of these companies still have billions of users, and sure, a small vocal selection will leave, but most people just return to the platforms after a few days or weeks as if nothing happened. Whether it's Reddit, Twitter, or even the new threads from Meta, we're quick to return to something comfortable even if we don't particularly like it, especially when there's no viable alternative. So is this the fall of Reddit? Well, I doubt it. But who knows, it might be the start of something else, because while it may be idealistic to think that we, as everyday people, have the power to change things, maybe that's the idealism we need. With the cost of living soaring, an economic crisis, and wages that can't be stretched far enough to provide an enjoyable life, people are worried about their finances now more than ever. And the sad truth is that skimping and saving can only take you so far. As a result, around 46% of Gen Z and 37% of millennials are working multiple jobs to make ends meet. We're in an era of the side hustle, and thanks to the internet, you can now easily monetize your hobbies and expertise to help provide that supplemental income. Some people play video games online and others sell handmade jewelry on Etsy. The online marketplace is thriving. So many sites allow you to sell your goods and services directly to consumers, wherever they are in the world. But there is another way to make money online, and one that doesn't require you to spend hours making a bracelet or mastering a video game. The only thing you need is fans. For someone who's been laid off, a young person who's been kicked out of the house, or anyone who needs money immediately, signing up for this platform is very enticing. They tell you all you need to do is post a few flirty photos and you'll be making loads of money in no time, all from the comfort of your bedroom. But they don't tell you who the people lurking behind the screen are, or about the system of oppression and the long-term pain for short-term financial gain. This is the dark side of OnlyFans. In 2016, British businessman Tim Stokely, alongside his older brother Thomas, created a website to help adult entertainers receive payments directly from their followers. Tim noticed that adult performers were promoting and selling their services on social media platforms like Instagram, but as the platform started cracking down on nudity, those performers found it challenging to promote their services, and trying to send content individually to each follower took a lot of work. OnlyFans solved the problem by creating a subscription service where fans could pay to access their favorite performers' content. In the beginning, only a few creators were frequent users, primarily performers who had already made a name for themselves in adult entertainment. Though initially small, the platform was a precursor for a change in the industry. Shifting their career online meant that a sex worker now had the option to control the means of production. No more going to set and working under the constraints of directors and producers that might not have always had their best interests in mind. They can now work from home and be self-employed. They could have complete control over their image and working conditions. In 2018, American Lenoid Radvinsky, a veteran of the online entertainment scene, bought a 75% share of OnlyFans. He made millions by creating websites that claimed to sell stolen or hacked passwords to porn sites. He was actually getting paid by those sites for directing online traffic their way. After buying OnlyFans, Radvinsky revamped its business model and saw incredible growth. Then the pandemic happened, and the popularity of OnlyFans increased exponentially, making it the household name it is today. With people out of work and in a vulnerable financial situation, OnlyFans provided easy revenue stream, a job they could work from home. On the other side of the screen, boredom, loneliness, and isolation drove more people to seek out the services of sex workers online, creating more demand than ever before. And suddenly, this small website was a smash hit, and on Twitter and other major media outlets, articles circulated about how much money some women were making. And not just women, men too can earn well on the site. A lot of people started wondering, should I start an OnlyFans of my own? For new creators, there's the impression that OnlyFans can pull you from crippling debt or buy you a new house. Or that it's easy money, just take off your clothes and pose under flattering light. Maybe take a video or two, and once you hit upload, Start counting those checks. The reality is that for most people, that's not going to happen. Nearly 75% of all the revenue on OnlyFans is going to the top 10% of creators. These people are mostly career sex workers or actual celebrities who had devout followings before their pivot to OnlyFans. Bella Thorne and Cardi B are some of the most traditionally famous posters on OnlyFans, and at one point, Thorne was making $11 million a month on the site, while Cardi B rakes in close to $10 million. And these are women who don't post nude content, nor do they have to work nearly as hard as the 90% of creators who struggle for a share of the remaining 25% of revenue on the platform. Many of these creators have to work 7-day weeks promoting themselves, marketing, corresponding with brands, and speaking with their subscribers just to earn a livable wage, and many don't even earn enough to make OnlyFans a full-time gig. The average creator only makes $180 a month. Now, OnlyFans has empowered sex workers, primarily those who have worked in the industry for decades, but the way the media covers the success of this minority suggests that anyone can make money this way. It's the classic survivorship bias. We listen to the ones who are thriving so much that we think that's the norm, and not realizing that they are the outliers and that the reality for the average creator isn't that glamorous. We're selling a dream to young men and women that sex work is easy money, and as a result, many people join the site and immediately start posting intimate and vulnerable photos without realizing the immense pressure and psychological effects that selling sex can have on a person. The hard truth is that this industry isn't for everyone, yet the narrative around OnlyFans deceives people into thinking it is for everyone. And at the end of the day, OnlyFans takes a 20% cut of your earnings and 0% of your trauma. The platform creates a direct link between your sexuality and your profit. It's easy to obsess over the statistics and analytics of your channel, but here, you're not judging your work or skill, you're judging your body. And it's not just you judging it. Putting yourself online like that means your body is out there for public scrutiny, and if there's one thing the internet loves to do, it's scrutinize. Before you know it, you start feeling less than adequate. Maybe you'd make more money if you had a bigger chest, lost weight, or dyed your hair a different color. Trying to make it on OnlyFans as an inexperienced sex worker changes your relationship with yourself and your sexuality, and it might seem worth it. Stories about people buying houses and paying off debt with money earned on OnlyFans enter casual conversation. The suggestion to start an OnlyFans channel is a flippant response to those with money struggles when, in reality, the average creator makes pennies, and many would have been better off using their time to work a minimum wage job. Imagine going through all that only to not make the money you hoped for, and you'd be left feeling like you sold out. Yet, you never even got paid. Still, for people in desperate situations, even a tiny amount of money could be a good supplement to their income, and the promise of OnlyFans preys on those in vulnerable positions. The site is notoriously awful at preventing underage users from signing up and takes no responsibility for hosting them. Teenagers can use a fake ID or a relative's passport to circumvent the safeguards currently in place to protect young people. Many minors are posting on the site, and OnlyFans hasn't taken firm action to deter them. Images of minors are paid for by people much older than them, with more money and power. They see a young person in a position to be taken advantage of, a child they can control through money. This platform allows minors to be roped into exploitative relationships from a young age. Underage creators are vulnerable to the same risks adults are when posting on the site, yet they lack the maturity to understand the consequences. Everything you post on the internet is permanent. Images posted online are downloaded and reposted without consent, and even if one day you choose to stop posting or leave OnlyFans, your content doesn't just cease to exist. Could this negatively impact future relationships or how your family and friends view you? Of course. The stigma sex workers face is harsh and demeaning, and some people think they can treat sex workers as less than human, that they deserve any negative consequence that comes their way. Stalking, rape threats, doxing, death threats, harassment, hacking. It's hard to trust even your so-called fans have your best interest in mind. OnlyFans stars have been the victim of break-ins and blackmail at the hands of their patrons. In one case, a stalker repeatedly broke in and hid in his favorite OnlyFans model's attic. Just do a quick Google search, and you'll see countless women's accounts of negative experiences, and to be honest, there's not much the site can do about it. Also, when money is exchanged, the boundaries between the creator and the fan are blurred. Unhealthy parasocial relationships form whereby the fans think they own a portion of their favorite creator. Voyeurism plays a role too, as some fans insert themselves into made-up fantasies or relationships. It reminds me of the parallels between OnlyFans and online dating. You seek someone to love or give you attention, yet you want to control the interaction altogether. More of us are conducting all aspects of our lives from the comfort of our homes, so we miss out on meaningful human connection and spontaneous interactions with others. This generation is plagued by increased rates of social isolation and loneliness. Young people are looking for intimacy through their phones and screens, but these aren't substitutes for real in-person connections. I talk more about this intersection of love and the internet in the video, The Dark Side of Online Dating. From a subscriber's point of view, the state of OnlyFans is also dark. People are often quick to blame the women who create content for these platforms, but statistically, the average user is a middle-aged married man. What attracts this demographic to the site? It could be loneliness, dissatisfaction in the marriage, or even a particular fetish. So they look for what they can't have in person or what they feel they lack in their relationships online. Let me clarify that two consenting adults exchanging money for sexual pleasure isn't inherently wrong. But when the dynamic replaces in-person sexual intimacy, OnlyFans users can teeter into porn addiction. Irritability, social isolation, anxiety, and depression are all side effects of too much porn. You might display more violent or aggressive sexual behavior, mirroring fantasies or fetishes you see online, things that a partner might not be comfortable with. It skews how you view your sexual partners and potential partners in person, and it flattens them to characters on a screen. There's something about intimacy that can only be achieved with another person. When your sexuality revolves around people on your computer and the relationships you uphold through your OnlyFans subscriptions, intimacy's indescribable, intangible magic is lost. Sex work is literally the oldest profession in the world, and it's not going anywhere. Technology will continue to develop, with OnlyFans being this generation's preferred form of online adult content. So how can we engage with the platform ethically and humanely? Well, first off, self-awareness is key on the part of both the creator and the user. Posting or consuming content without considering your why could cause misalignment between your values and actions. Just continue to ask yourself questions. Do I feel safe and comfortable showing this part of myself online? Is my use of OnlyFans interfering with relationships in my personal life? Is this platform and how it's promoted safe for creators? How do my ethics align with all this? Be brutally honest with your answers. Your honesty sheds a light on the dark side of OnlyFans. You become an informed consumer or creator, making the site more hospitable for everyone.
On the 13th of April 2023, a 21-year-old member of the US Air Force National Guard, Jax Teixeira, was arrested on live TV for leaking classified documents. Teixeira had shared classified information about the war in Ukraine with his Discord group, Thug Shaker Central, where he was the leader and administrator. This group represented everything that's wrong with Discord today. What started out as a private place for 20 to 30 young men to discuss common interests soon turned into a haven for racist and religious bigots. What's even worse is, due to the private nature of the platform, you can never know who is who. Teixeira may not have meant any harm by sharing this information. It's possible he just wanted to look cool in front of his friends. But what he didn't know was that the people in that group were not his friends. Shortly after sharing the documents, they found their way to a Russian language channel on Telegram before making the rounds to the darker corners of the internet. And eventually the New York Times reported on the story, the Pentagon launched an investigation, and the rest, as they say, is history. And it all started on Discord, an app that has become a corner of the internet that's particularly appealing to people who wish to remain in the shadows. People who want the freedom to say and do whatever they like without having to face the consequences. And while this most recent event has made Discord a popular topic on mainstream news channels, the dangers of the app run far beyond national security. Before we talk about the dangers of Discord, one thing we must understand is that if we want to improve social media in general, people like you and me who care about online safety need to get into the rooms where decisions concerning these apps are made. Founders Jason Catron and Stanislav Vishnevsky started the company in 2015 with aspirations to turn it into a game developer studio. However, when a multiplayer game they created failed to catch on, but the communication tool around gaming became a hit, they shifted focus to the communication and messaging part of the platform. Although Discord is still mostly known for its video game communities, it's not just about gaming anymore. In fact, only 20% of Discord users report using the service strictly for gaming-related communication. So what do most people use the service for? Well, what makes Discord unique is that it brings together a lot of elements of the internet's early days. With its simple format, anonymous usernames, and real-time messaging, Discord is reminiscent of early AOL chat rooms. But it's also a place for friends to congregate, chat, and send random stuff to each other, reminiscent of the original social media platform MySpace. Unlike most other social media platforms that make money through advertising, Discord doesn't have ads. Instead, it gets revenue from its popular in-app service, Nitro, which allows users to get upgraded features like customized profiles, access to animated emojis, and larger upload capacity. On other social media platforms, the advertisers are often the ones who draw the line, because they don't want their ads running next to or associated with disturbing content. Content moderation is a necessity for platforms that earn money from advertisers, but Discord isn't one of them. This is why the app can run with those pretty loose content guidelines. The lack of content moderation can be a good thing. It allows you freedom of expression without the fear you'll get cancelled or have your account permanently banned. But when a lack of content moderation is paired with Discord's anonymity, it can quickly lead to disaster. Like its precursors from a previous generation, Discord's bread and butter is its anonymous chat rooms, but it struggles with the same question that so many social media apps face. What's more important, anonymity or transparency? Well, right now on Discord, it's anonymity. A vast majority of Discord servers are private, invite-only groups with fewer than 10 people, and even on public channels, only servers with more than 200 members are discoverable with the search tool. The app also doesn't keep a record of its audio chats, one of its most popular features, so inappropriate or criminal conversations are almost impossible to monitor. This level of anonymity is why people like the app, but also what makes it so much riskier, even for the users themselves. Scammers have found a home on Discord, relying on the allure of Nitro to swindle users of their hard-earned money. A common scam starts with a DM from an unknown contact and an offer to join Nitro for free. The scammer claims they have an extra Nitro account to give away, and all you need to do is follow a link or scan a QR code. If you click or scan, get ready to say goodbye to all your money or your personal data. And a lot of the scams on Discord involve crypto or NFT theft. In May 2022, hackers impersonating the NFT marketplace OpenSea hijacked that company's Discord server. They advertised a free NFT from an exclusive project and convinced users to connect their crypto wallets. And once the users connected their wallets, all of their NFTs and crypto were stolen. The hackers got away with about $20,000 in digital assets. Then in July 2022,
last night at about 10 p.m., my entire Discord was hacked, and thousands of people in my Discord, their accounts, were compromised by a hacker.
Popular Twitch streamer Mischief's Discord server got hacked as well. Scammers sent out offers for free Nitro upgrades to his community of 55,000 people. Over 1,000 users clicked a link that took them straight to ransomware. The list goes on. Some hackers basically kidnap Discord accounts, holding them hostage until a ransom is paid to them. There are even accusations of hackers sending out malware via Discord to government agencies to try and exploit them. Discord has tried to curb these problems. In the space of just 3 months between April and June 2022, the company removed nearly 28 million spam accounts, but it's like they just can't see the forest for the trees, because all those scammers need to do is just create another account and we're right back where we started. Another area of concern for Discord and its community is the proliferation of extremist and violent groups. The nonprofit counter-extremism think tank, the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, found that Discord and Steam are the worst game streaming platforms for politically radical content. And the hate doesn't just stay in the chat rooms. The young men behind the Unite the Right rally that happened in Virginia in 2017 hung out in private chats on Discord with disturbing names like the Führer's gas chamber. A New York Times investigation showed that they then used the app to post anti-Semitic Nazi symbols and praise the German dictator. Then they used these same Discord servers to plan logistics for the rally that left one counter-protester dead. These aren't just keyboard warriors as you like to assume. The app's ability to spread hateful messaging and allow those spreading it to remain completely anonymous has real-life consequences. 18-year-old Peyton Gendron, who went to a store in a predominantly black neighborhood and started shooting in 2022, discussed his plans for the shooting on Discord. He explained his motivations and described himself as a white supremacist, a fascist, and an anti-Semite. He wrote that he targeted the store because of its high concentration of black people. The New York Attorney General said that Discord and other platforms like Reddit, Twitch, and 4chan played a role in radicalizing the shooter. Discord breeds an environment where anyone, especially young people, can put their trust in unfamiliar people and dangerous ideas. Teenagers are increasingly using the app to communicate instead of texting or Snapchat. Like on other social media platforms, age verification on Discord simply doesn't work. Age restrictions are almost impossible to enforce without some major and possibly invasive action from the company, so there's no stopping from kids wandering onto servers where they'll encounter some scams or some violent rhetoric already mentioned, or worse. As crazy as it sounds, we haven't talked about the worst part of Discord. There are channels on Discord dedicated to some of the most horrific things you can imagine, whether it's sharing sexually explicit content without consent, older, disgusting perverts looking for teenagers to communicate with, or channels dedicated to encouraging self-harm or even more permanent damage. The National Center on Sexual Exploitation added Discord to its 2022 Dirty Dozen list of entities that profit from and facilitate sexual exploitation. And it's not just speculation. In March of 2023, police rescued a 13-year-old missing girl in North Carolina after she disappeared from her Dallas home. A 34-year-old man spent months communicating with her on Discord, traveled to Texas to meet her, kidnapped, and her. In fact, many predators on Discord use the app to convince young teenagers to leave their homes and meet in real life without telling their parents. Discord's low levels of content moderation also make sharing explicit and illegal content much easier than most other on social media. Discord's low levels of content moderation also make sharing explicit and illegal content much easier than most other social media platforms. A 19-year-old University of Florida football quarterback was arrested in 2022 for allegedly distributing CP on Discord and admitted to being part of servers that discussed, solicited, and distributed the material. These stories are terrifying and leave many parents feeling helpless. Parents don't understand Discord as much as they do Instagram or TikTok, which many parents use themselves. The app is less intuitive for older people. Learning how their child might be communicating on it isn't always clear. Even schools are at a loss when it comes to Discord. Many schools block other common social media apps, but Discord is mostly off their radar, so teenagers can use it freely even while in school. In fairness to Discord, it is trying to reduce the amount of horrific incidents happening, especially to its younger users. The app does have parental controls that can prohibit a minor from receiving a friend request or a DM from someone they don't know, and it increasingly removes more and more accounts for inappropriate and dangerous behavior. The company is also investing in education for parents so that they can learn how the app works and how to set these controls for their kids. It's partnered with an organization called Connect Safely, a nonprofit dedicated to educating people about online safety, privacy, security, and digital wellness. Together, they host learning sessions with the National Parent-Teacher Association to try and inform parents about the app and how they can keep their kids safe, but many parents feel that all of this is just a performative by the company because when there is a complaint about a clear issue, even when a child is endangered, the company isn't very helpful. Discord does have channel moderators who enforce the company's guidelines. They investigate situations and can warn, quarantine, or ban users from the channels. Like at other social media companies, this in-house trust and safety team is there to respond to user reports. But that's the problem, isn't it? They just respond. Discord only acts if someone complains. It doesn't proactively seek out or mark explicit content. For many people, including a lot of parents, Discord's safety issues won't be resolved until the company takes more proactive steps. Now, for every horror story on the app, there are also stories of community, kids who find friends in their Discord servers when they're being bullied in real life at school, people who meet others that share their same peculiar interests. This is the beauty of the internet. It breaks down barriers, it connects us when we feel alone, and it shows us worlds, people, and ideas we never would have seen or even considered before. In fact, as much as Jack Teixeira, who leaked the classified intelligence information on Discord, created a dangerous and chaotic situation for the US military, the organization isn't completely disregarding the app. It's actually found ways to use it to its own benefit. The US military is facing a dire recruiting shortage and uses Discord to meet prospective Gen Z recruits. It has a 17,000-member chat room for service members to talk about first-person shooter games, meet with career counselors, and take advantage of other community services. For 18 to 21-year-olds who are the target for military recruitment, video games are one of the most popular forms of media. Discord is where many gamers go to seek community, and the US Department of Defense is hoping they find community and purpose in serving their country. The balance between these large entities like the military face is how they'll supervise their young workforce, a workforce that lives their lives online and also has access to classified secrets. With all of the dangers of Discord, from individual safety to national security, what can be done? The Teixeira leak helped open the US military's eyes to the role Discord plays in its members' lives. Special Operations Command, which oversees the most elite forces, told its members not to post anything on Discord that they wouldn't want to be seen by the general public. The Pentagon even has a guide for military officials to counsel Discord users working in the government about their personal security measures. In terms of protecting kids, most of the current proposed solutions center around how to protect children on social media in general. Currently, the legal protections for children are a patchwork of disparate laws with a lot of gray areas, loopholes, and technologically outdated mandates. For example, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act of 1998 came into effect in April of 2000 and is the only federal legislation that addresses the dangerous effects of targeted advertising on children, and we can all agree that the internet looks very different than it did in 2000. There is a bipartisan law that proposes responsibilities for tech platforms to protect children from digital harm, but it failed to make it into Congress's 2023 spending plan. Even so, Discord wasn't really a part of that conversation and still isn't looped in with other big tech companies that people usually refer to. Every social media company struggles with the same issue as Discord, the conflict between freedom and safety. You might say our entire society is struggling with it right now. Users flock to Discord because it offers what seems to be like the ultimate freedom of expression: anonymity. But has that anonymity gone too far? Has it exposed an online landscape that's doing more harm than good? Unfortunately, Discord is still largely ignored by anyone who has the power to try and fix it, or they just don't get it at all. Either way, we better start paying attention and understanding Discord because it's currently shaping an entire generation across the globe. And the solution isn't to just ban the app like the US Congress hopes to do with TikTok. Watch this video next to find out why that's a bad idea. A couple of weeks ago, I was having dinner with a friend and overheard what had to be a first date at the table right next to us. The conversation was awkward at first as they both seemed to struggle to get a good flow going. I looked over a bit later to see that they were now much more engaged in discussion. They shared their interests and had started looking each other in the eye more often. They even touched hands. Slowly, the pair of them seemed to grow affectionate towards each other. I went to the bathroom and the guy on the date walked in and used the urinal next to me. And to my greatest shock, right there on his phone was an open dating app. With his less busy hand, he was swiping left and right. Back at the table, he ended the date abruptly and called it a night. Just like that, he was moving on to the next option available to him at just the click of a button. Maybe I'm a bit out of touch, but what I witnessed seems so cruel and callous that I asked myself, is that what dating is like now? Where we just swipe human beings left or right, discarding and approving potential mates on our quest to lasting romance, a one-night stand, or something in between. Let's get one thing out of the way first. Dating sucks and has always sucked. Every date you go on, whether from an app or a more natural arrangement, you set yourself up for the strong likelihood of being disappointed or disappointing someone else. You might get your heart broken when your love is unrequited, or have to tear someone's heart out when you're just not feeling it. You might say the wrong thing, or your date might not even show up. These worries are the same now as they have been since romantic love became a thing in the 19th century. There's less emphasis on men needing to pick up their date in a hot rod and buy them dinner and drinks. And of course, gay and lesbian dates are more common, but otherwise, many of the worries are the same. Sadly, though, there is something distinctly different and more sinister about the world of online dating. You may need to be older to remember, but online dating first became a thing in the mid-90s and was heavily stigmatized at the time. Using Match.com or Kiss.com was for people who couldn't handle the real world of dating. Culturally, it was seen as a sign of weakness. Just like everything else that came with the internet, online dating grew and the potential dangers grew with it. Meeting a stranger, especially alone, poses a risk. Dating apps pose a slightly aggravated risk because they tend to attract an outsized portion of psychopaths and love addicts, with one seeing you as a victim and the other as their savior. That's not to suggest that you'll end up at the bottom of a river if you go on a few online dates, but that, at the very least, you might have had a really bad experience or two. When services like eHarmony arrived, they made a stronger case for computer-based matching using more detailed information. The services required you to take a quiz and would then try to pair people up based on their compatibility. Then in 2012, everything changed when Tinder arrived on the scene. The premise was simple. Once you opened the app, you were greeted with a multitude of options for a potential mate. A huge picture and a tiny description about them stared you right in the face. All you had to do was swipe right if you were interested and left if you weren't. If two people swiped right on each other, bingo, they matched and they could start a conversation. Even with just this basic understanding of how dating apps work, it shows how much we've managed to turn people into a commodity. This swiping feature isn't much different than flipping through products on a carousel ad you might see on Facebook or Instagram, or sifting through the different brand names in the grocery store. Right, left, is this really how we want to be viewed by others? Think about it, you're looking for someone to be intimate and vulnerable with, and we're presenting ourselves like a flavor of chips on a shelf.
Realistically, how much can you expect from a relationship that starts out almost transactionally? The state of modern dating is the consequence of the system that we've created. Dating on these apps is now ruthless, with ghosting, no-shows, and hostile and inappropriate messaging being much more common. Meeting up with someone on a dating app is no different than trying to buy or sell something on Kijiji. If one of the parties loses interest, they typically just don't show up. No message, no courtesy call, they just move on. This is bad enough when you're trying to just buy a product, but much worse when the product is your time, attention, and emotions. When an app treats people like products on a shelf, this attitude rubs off on its users. You're not swiping right on a human being, you're swiping on a product, and if that product doesn't seem desirable anymore, you discard it. And these are the factors of dating apps before we've even considered how their algorithms factor in. Although Tinder insists it doesn't use this system anymore, many of the card-based dating apps use a desirability score, or ELO. The more you match with people you swipe right on, the more desirable you're considered. The app then pushes your profile to more people. This process has little to do with making a match. The goal is to keep people on the platform by dangling desirable individuals in front of them. The more attractive people you see, the more likely you are to feel hope that the one is out there and you won't delete the app. It's similar to how lotteries lure you in with bigger jackpots. Even though the odds are still next to impossible, the increasing pile of money keeps you hopeful when despair is the more appropriate response. When someone ranks higher, it doesn't make them more likely to be good in a relationship, it just means that people found them attractive based on the superficial criteria. Putting more of these people in your set of cards does nothing to increase your odds of finding love, it just increases the odds of you staying on the platform. Those with lower scores are shown less often, which gives them two options: give up, or pay to have their profile boosted. This common feature among the apps exploits people who don't present well for profit. Being able to boost your profile just gets you back to a more level playing field that you shouldn't have been denied in the first place. Remember that these platforms are, above all else, money-making systems. As we discussed in our recent video on algorithms, the bias towards profit has consequences, and in the case of dating apps, those consequences may be the dire state of the dating landscape or your chances for lasting love. Maybe the most disastrous thing about dating apps is that we're ultimately commodifying love, and that can change the way we view and experience it. When we're attracted to someone, our brain releases the chemical dopamine as a reward response. Online dating apps train us to constantly seek this dopamine hit from attraction or lust. Then when we're with someone, we're no longer getting that high of attraction. We know it can easily be found on an app in our pocket. All we have to do is ghost, deceive, or abruptly break up with someone in order to get it again. Even just looking at an attractive person on your app will give you a hit of dopamine, making loyalty to a lover much less appealing. You get hooked into a reward cycle, it becomes addictive. Just as you get a blip of joy from a like on social media, you get a hit of dopamine from a match on Tinder. It keeps you coming back even if you've found someone worth keeping. Most of us have been with someone we loved and still question whether there was someone better out there. Apps like Tinder exploit this feeling. They overwhelm you with choice, making you feel like you're never making the right one. And so you move on, back to the phone, back to the dopamine hits so readily available. As you go on dates and start relationships, the app is always dangling that shinier object or human being right in front of you. Because it's so fast and easy to get a new shot of dopamine by simply opening the app on our phones, we don't give ourselves enough time to get to know a person. Once a date gets even slightly boring, we're off to the bathroom to find the next dopamine hit. The problem with this is that although we're spiking our brains full of dopamine, we aren't spending enough time in relationships for our brains to produce oxytocin, or those warm, cuddly feelings which are more common in long-term relationships or with close friends and family. Oxytocin helps reduce our blood pressure and cortisol levels, which help reduce stress. It also promotes growth and healing. If you've ever been in a long-term loving relationship, you know just how at peace you feel. How when you're with this person, everything feels alright with the world. Dating apps are weaning us off of this feeling. Now, if those were the only problems with dating apps, then maybe the situation wouldn't be so dire, but sadly, there's more. Like most online interactions, dating apps are often devoid of the empathy and consideration you typically get in real-world interactions. Sure, there are bad experiences to be had at your workplace or school, and occasionally, someone will behave callously towards you in person, but these bad experiences are far more prevalent online, where people can hide behind their computer screens. The odd thing about this, though, is that even with all of their issues, dating apps seem to work. People do find long-lasting relationships on these platforms, and of course people looking for hookups find that too. Meeting people in real life is hard, maybe harder these days than ever before. When you meet someone in real life and want to ask them on a date, you're taking a big risk, and we're all hyper aware of that risk. Well, most of us. If you ask a colleague or a peer on a date, for example, you're more likely to face some level of scrutiny now, even if it's small. And if you ask for someone's number in a grocery store, well, maybe you become the weirdo people complain about on Twitter. Considering this, it's not hard to see why people want anonymity in their dating life. Still, these dating apps don't need to be set up algorithmically to encourage cruelty or gouge less desirable people for money. Instead, we should empathize getting to know someone before a date and caring about them as human beings first, not just another item for sale at the nearby big box store. To do that, though, we need to crack open the black box and fundamentally change how the algorithms that power these dating apps work. Click the video on your screen right now to find out more.
Social media platforms have created parasocial relationships with people called influencers. These are people who make relatable content about their lives that can be comforting or aspirational to their audience. The problem is influencer culture on the internet quickly moved from people genuinely sharing their authentic lives to people curating a lifestyle that makes them the most ad revenue. Everything for views.
MrBeast has cured 1,000 people of blindness, built 100 homes for low-income families across the American continent, removed 33 million pounds of trash from the ocean, planted 20 million trees, and done much, much more. He might seem like a real-life superhero using his wealth and access to make the world a better place, but the harsh truth is that Beast's philanthropy will never save the world because of one fundamental flaw in his way of giving. In 2023, Jimmy Donaldson, also known as MrBeast, spent $5 million to help 1,000 people with curable blindness see again. At face value, this seems like a bold and selfless act of charity, but things get a little unclear when you add more details. Everything was filmed, from interviews with the surgeon to the surgery and the enormous gratitude of the patients after the procedure was done. Today, the video sits at over 200 million views on YouTube, and he's turned performing acts of charity into a content-creating machine. And while some are off-put by Donaldson's approach to giving, hundreds of millions of viewers enjoy the spectacle. MrBeast is the #1 YouTuber in the world, regardless of any complex feelings attached to him. Jimmy has helped many more people fulfill their fundamental needs on his YouTube channel and has even created a charity-exclusive channel called Beast Philanthropy. But will his approach to philanthropy inspire others and ultimately make the world a better place? I don't think so, and I'll explain why. Jimmy's YouTube channel and his associated businesses generate over $700 million in revenue yearly. However, if you've watched his channel, you'd know that he puts a lot of money back into making more videos. Most of the production costs are tied up in a charitable activity, like donating $30 million worth of food or buying 100 homes and giving them away. According to Donaldson, he puts all the revenue from YouTube ads, merchandise, and sponsorships back into the channel. He's also boldly stated that he plans to die with $0 in his bank account. MrBeast is very successful both as a philanthropic revenue generator and as a YouTube channel drawing in subscribers. Now, typically philanthropy isn't exactly exciting. It's dry work that involves charity organizations asking for donations in many different ways and distributing resources in a calculated fashion. The most exciting format before MrBeast was probably the old school telethon, where performers and celebrities entertain us for a cause. Now, some have claimed that MrBeast continues this trend of providing entertainment for the sake of charity, but with Donaldson's approach, there's a very important difference. Before MrBeast, the entertainment and cause were largely kept separate. Donaldson collapses this barrier, making charity the entertainment itself. When we watch his videos, we're drawn to the acts of charity being committed before our eyes. We see a surprising display of kindness that you would just never see in your ordinary life. And then we get the reaction from the beneficiary. Just like in the prank videos, the most value comes from how surprised people react. The gift is the setup, and the reaction is the true payoff. As viewers, some of the joy the beneficiaries express spreads to us. Psychologists refer to this as emotional contagion. It's where you catch the emotions of others and replicate them ourselves. When you watch MrBeast videos, even the cynical among us can't help but smile when somebody's life has changed. In the video where Donaldson pays for surgery to cure blindness, it's almost impossible not to feel some of the joy that the patients are experiencing when they can see clearly again for the first time in years. But it's not just these reactions that we're responding to. We're replicating the feelings of Jimmy himself. Giving to others in need feels good. By giving to others, you can actually get a helper's high, which is when the endorphins are released from the brain's reward center. This can improve your self-esteem, ease stress, and lower your blood pressure. We might not get the full effect that he feels just by watching his videos, but enough of it rubs off on us to keep us joyfully watching. Now, unlike many other YouTube channels, MrBeast has a hook that speaks to something other than our desire to be entertained. When we watch his videos, we're literally supporting his charity. Your view generates more ad revenue, which goes to more charitable causes, and he repeatedly emphasizes this point to make sure you're very aware that your view is the equivalent of a donation. You get both the entertainment value and the opportunity to feel benevolent while wasting time on YouTube. It's an impressive angle, you have to admit. It's philanthropy without any sacrifice on your part. You're only giving up time, and that's where you're being exposed to content that's carefully designed to keep you glued to your screen. MrBeast doesn't just rely on his philanthropy format to hook you. From years of studying successful YouTube videos and creating challenge-focused content, he knows how to put together compelling entertainment. His astronomical view counts are often the result of attention editing, a process that removes any pauses where viewers might find their attention waning. The style of editing also features nauseatingly fast cuts, loud sounds, and flashy effects. After he releases a video, his team looks at metrics to see where people are dropping off and makes even further edits. This style of editing might be on the way out, though. Even Jimmy himself is encouraging other creators to let their videos breathe and be longer. The slot machine approach to content is starting to wear on the general YouTube and TikTok audience. MrBeast seems to have successfully moved on from the retention editing style he created to a more patient and relaxed one, even though still fast-paced. So what does Jimmy Donaldson gain from this model when he has obliged himself to give all his earnings away? His videos didn't start out as philanthropic stunts. He made a variety of content, including a challenge video in which he counted to 10,000 in one take. Before his first sponsorship, he gave large gifts to his family who were unknowingly part of his pranks. In one video, he filled his brother's home with slime and then gave him a new one. He's also given huge tips to delivery drivers and handed out large sums to random Twitch streamers. His YouTube channel skyrocketed after he posted a video in 2017 of himself giving $10,000 in sponsorship money to a homeless man. This caught international attention and launched his channel to a new level. He had long desired to become a successful YouTuber, and with his new philanthropic angle, he found his road to online fame. It's hard to peg his motives as altruistic when they can clearly be traced back to a desire for online fame. But it's also possible that once he got a taste of philanthropy, it changed him. He rejected materialism and walked a path of giving. Ultimately, you never really get to know someone's motives for certain, and more likely than not, they're complex and multifaceted. Knowing whether he's using charity for his own selfish ends or out of a pure sense of duty isn't actually that important. We can find answers to whether MrBeast will actually help the world by considering the nature of philanthropy and the ethical considerations involved. Philanthropy is simply the act of sharing your wealth to help others. To simplify things, it's commonly understood as something rich people do with some of the surplus finances they've accumulated. It's generally used to fill holes in society that are neglected by governments. Philanthropists might donate money to schools that cater to children with special needs, or organizations that will help save the planet's dying ecosystems. Philanthropy has helped many people improve their lives while in dire circumstances, but it isn't without criticism. Philanthropy can often take the form of one-off gifts that are a temporary solution for what is likely to be recurring issues. Now, these gifts don't often address systemic problems and the root causes that perpetuate suffering. Philanthropy can be very undemocratic. Instead of elected officials allocating money on behalf of a voting public, wealthy individuals decide what is worthy of their resources. This can give the rich more power to shape society beyond their basic ability to vote. When some big donors give large sums to nonprofit organizations, they try to steer where the funds go to suit their specific interest. While the nonprofit usually spreads resources based on their assessment of needs, philanthropists can compromise this balance by attaching requirements to their donations. It's not an unreasonable ask on their behalf, but it might lead to worse results for those in need. There's also challenges in determining the appropriateness of what's expected from the recipient. Is a photo op asking too much, or what about having to return the favor later in life? When a corporation donates money to a school of journalism, do they expect to be free of criticism in the future? There's power dynamics at play that can make beneficiaries vulnerable to exploitation. Philanthropists giving donations to a good cause is far better than if they were just hoarding money, and they do help fill gaps that governments fail to address. But we still need to be honest about the limitations and unintended consequences they can have on society, especially when many of these problems are inadvertently compounded by Mr. Beast's philanthropic styling. Many nonprofits today try to treat donations as a partnership with a person in need. It's a way of giving the receiver of a donation agency rather than treating them as a passive and helpless member of society. Mr. Beast treats philanthropy as something you do for people. Stemming from his prank video roots, he surprises beneficiaries with over-the-top gifts, and we, as the viewer, get to see their gratitude. His use of shock charity makes for exciting viewing, but is it respectful to those he's giving gifts to? The recipients aren't consenting when they're surprised and captured on video. It's likely that they do after the fact, but that's in a situation where they stand to lose the gift or come off as ungrateful. Their consent, in other words, is coerced to an extent. The individuals he features are also likely not completely informed about what they're participating in. Are they fully aware of the scope of Mr. Beast and what it means to be a helpless object of pity in one of his videos? Despite the fact that he is the most subscribed YouTube channel, most people over 30 aren't really aware of it, beyond the name. In one of Mr. Beast's videos, he travels to several African countries, including Kenya and Zimbabwe, to build 100 wells. His actions helped 500,000 people access clean drinking water, which is no small feat. It also shamed the responsible African governments for failing to spend money on such an essential need. It can't be denied that Mr. Beast had a big impact on the well-being of Africans in the countries he visited. And yet at the same time, some feel that he was exploiting African children for content. The video was criticized for being an example of white saviorism, where a white person assumes they know what's best for someone who doesn't share the same skin color they do. Even worse is that Jimmy is capturing their gratitude for us to gawk at. It's the video version of a volunteer abroad taking a selfie with starving children. Donaldson took to X before the video to suggest that he didn't care how people reacted to it. He did a good deed that helped hundreds of thousands of people and isn't worried about the optics. And in a way, he's justified in ignoring the hangups, like the concept of white saviors to get people urgent help. But it doesn't mean there couldn't be a more respectful way of doing it. You could not glorify the act in a video, for one. The example points to a failure of his sporadic one-off methods of giving. A problem with wells is that they need to be consistently maintained. Now, will he be going back to these sites every year to make sure they're still running? In some areas of Africa, 60% of the wells are broken, so there's a long-term system that needs to be in place. Now, if he wasn't laser-focused on playing the YouTube algorithm, he could probably do a great job at respecting the agency of those that he helps. He could also present his charitable actions not as a gift from someone choosing to be benevolent, but as a duty as someone with the means. Given that his vast wealth comes from the acts of charities itself, there's a fair obligation for him to give back to good causes, as he does. In Mr. Beast's videos, the problems he resolves with his gifts are very simplified. Donaldson rarely brings up the root causes of the issues he's helping others to cope with. The people he helps are represented as having simple needs that aren't fulfilled, rather than symptomatic of larger systemic issues found in countries like America. This could include poor healthcare coverage or runaway housing prices. The impact of his philanthropy is very limited in this way. Instead of creating lasting change or at least working towards it, Donaldson is satisfied with the one-offs that come and go. There aren't really any videos with the title, "I created systemic change in 20 countries with chronic systemic failures." It wouldn't really make for the most exciting viewing, so I don't blame him. You wouldn't get surprise reactions and immense gratitude. Instead, you'd have really long meetings about thoughtfully addressing needs, and honestly, I highly doubt that he could keep up his smiling enthusiasm for that long. The impact of Mr. Beast's specific acts of philanthropy ultimately may not last. His influence, however, might live on in his audience and his peers on YouTube, and it could even create a lasting impact on philanthropy itself. But is that a good thing? There's already numerous copycat channels on YouTube featuring plucky, loud-talking hosts surprising people with charitable acts, and they follow a similar formula. Each clone more imperfect than the last in comparison to the original, and the same criticisms of Mr. Beast apply to those channels. On TikTok, gift giving has become a whole genre of video. with a smaller scale, much like the format. All this philanthropic content is probably healthier overall than other trends like conspiracy videos or prank videos, but are people being encouraged to become more generous, or are young viewers being influenced to become content creators with a charity spin? Now, helping others is a positive thing, it's just that it's more likely to be a side effect of pursuing online fame among those influenced by Mr. Beast. Philanthropy is just the means to becoming well known on YouTube and TikTok. Mr. Beast's influence seems to be that it's okay to exploit an act of charity and the beneficiaries for your own ends. Have charitable acts risen as a result of Mr. Beast is really hard to say, but we do know that philanthropy caught on camera has definitely become more common. Philosophers and religious leaders have long expressed the virtue or moral duty of not using others as mere means to an end. Immanuel Kant, an 18th century German philosopher, described this duty as a categorical imperative. Act in such a way that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, always at the same time as an end, and never simply as a means. It's questionable that Mr. Beast and his legion of imitators treat the people they give to as an end in themselves. They seem more like a means to their growth as content creators. And when the trend dies down and the chance to become famous from charity stunts fades, then so too does the interest in philanthropy. There is the chance, however, that when content creators get a taste for helping others, it has a positive, lasting impression. It just doesn't really seem as likely. If the Mr. Beast formula were to be spread more widely to charity organizations and big donors, what kind of world would that be? Imagine Doctors Without Borders only helping persons in need if the cause had viral potential. Now picture people dying on stretchers as non-government organization workers stop to make sure they capture the gratitude of someone they helped on camera. They don't return to the same region to check in. That wouldn't really be interesting to their viewership. It's on to the next set of people in need who are capable of generating the perfect clickbait headline and thumbnail. When you apply the Mr. Beast formula more widely to philanthropy, it doesn't really work. As expressed in the first part of Kant's categorical imperative, the essence of immortality, then, is to make an exception of myself by acting on maxims that I cannot willfully universalize. Is it always wrong to act in one way while wishing that everyone else would act otherwise? Can we universalize helping others only if it produces viral content? No, the consequences of exclusively Beast philanthropy would be disastrous, which is why the Mr. Beast formula won't save the world. Mr. Beast's world is a chaotic one where we help people not based on need but on opportunity. No one would really be able to count on help when they need it, and they'd have to fit the demands of an eye-catching thumbnail. If every philanthropist behaved like Mr. Beast, would actually probably not be better off. His style of philanthropy has a real hard limitation. By making philanthropy itself the entertainment, he's locked himself into a very limited form of philanthropy. He's doomed to engage in one-off charity stunts that don't lead to reliable, lasting help for those in need. He's cut himself off from the less flashy grunt work that more rigorous philanthropy requires, like research and advocacy. Many NPOs conduct research, often by collecting data from their charity work, and then use that evidence to advocate local governments on behalf of the people they're trying to assist. It's a way of showing where the real needs are and where government leaders ought to be allocating resources. The right approach to helping people on a large scale is very systemic. It's supported by data, connected to the right organized charities, and advocates for policy change. But that's not really going to make an exciting video either. You won't see officials giving a viral-worthy reaction to the evidence that they're undeserving thousands of citizens whose well-being they're ultimately responsible for. There's also worthwhile causes that aren't well suited for a large YouTube audience. Charities that support marginalized groups are sometimes seen as diverse, even when they're fulfilling a real unmet need. Charities in general struggle with this problem. Some causes are harder to sell than others, even if they have the potential to help large numbers of people. By throwing a YouTube audience into the mix, the need to satisfy an all-pleasing cause is heightened that much more. Donaldson claimed he didn't care about the backlash he got over building wells in Africa, but it was likely a calculated consideration. He probably knew his audience would appreciate the gesture, while critics are unlikely to be fans of his videos anyway. He probably wouldn't undertake a cause that would lose his subscribers and fans, and the Beast model of philanthropy encourages others to take the same approach to content. So what are we to make the philanthropy of Mr. Beast then? While it doesn't seem fit to save the world or even reliably help, it does still make a difference in people's lives. And it's random sort of way. MrBeast has also founded a charity organization to help out using means not tied directly to YouTube. So it's really not just all flashy jackpot giving from him. But it's largely just not sustainable. Trends come and go, and the YouTuber at the top of the food chain will inevitably fall from grace, and the impact of their work will wane. Jimmy Donaldson is already mired in recent scandals. He's been accused of running an unsafe work environment, and the trials for his new reality show Beast Games have left many people injured and dissatisfied with their treatment. Entertainment is just a competitive field, and the nature of YouTube means the competition is almost endless. Some competition can be healthy, but it can also drive people to win at all costs. There's no denying that Donaldson is driven to succeed, but as is often the case with overly competitive people, they will cross red lines to stay at the top. Now, MrBeast has a really big buffer to work with. If someone does charitable work, we're more willing to forgive their negative qualities and actions. It's referred to as the charity effect. Donaldson's almost exploitative videos sometimes are less criticized for this reason. If he's ultimately helping people, many believe we shouldn't be critical of him. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of comments under this video suggesting this very thing. But while his individual acts of generosity can be admired, I do think we should be open to scrutinizing the potential harmful effects of philanthropy as content. It robs people of their agency. It turns what could be consistent, reliable help into random acts of charity. It perpetuates chaos for clicks. Now look, I've criticized MrBeast a lot in this video, so it is only fair to put forward some recommendations based on where Donaldson and other philanthropists go wrong. So here is what I would recommend to provide more ethical, viral philanthropy content. The first is that you kind of have to give anonymously. So instead of MrBeast's big smiley face on the thumbnail, you have the masked philanthropist. They never reveal who they are and leave no traces of their true identity. This would destroy the power imbalance between the giver and the receiver. The recipient of their donation would never be able to find their generous benefactor and wouldn't be able to return the favor even if they wanted to. Rather than leaping out of a bush to surprise your donation recipient, the masked philanthropist should engage in lengthy consultation sessions with the gift receiver. They should understand their needs by engaging in some discussion and shouldn't force a final say. They should always make the recipient feel as though they can make decisions on their own. When giving to an organization, it's best to give without strings attached. The masked philanthropist should allow any nonprofit to meet needs based on its own criteria and not seek to fulfill a personal agenda. The masked philanthropist should always address the root causes in the video, and if they're not giving directly to a cause that impacts the source of a problem, they should address the root cause in a thoughtful monologue. It can be a nice way to cap off a video while making the audience more informed. And even though they're creating content for competitive media platforms, the masked philanthropist should never prioritize entertainment over the safety, agency, and well-being of the beneficiary. Anyone seriously considering making philanthrotainment is probably worried that their video might not be very exciting at this point, but I have some suggestions to help with that too. You could create the spectacle your audience craves as a reward for accomplishing your philanthropic goals. After hitting a target of a 5% reduction in youth homelessness, for example, you could fill your own house with yoga balls and record yourself trying to get around. This could separate philanthropy from entertainment while still giving viewers something exciting to anticipate. I'm not going to pretend this is a sure way to succeed with more ethical philanthrotainment. It's impossible to know with any certainty what will succeed online. But wouldn't a title, "I filled my house with yoga balls after reducing youth homelessness by 5%, at least maybe pique your interest? Now before I leave, I do want to point out that there's a significant drawback to the style of philanthropy I just described. It's not going to give you the kind of good feelings that MrBeast probably gets when he gives so directly. This form of philanthropy is bound to feel less tangible. The results won't be as immediate, and the gratitude will be less capturable in a single moment. It requires you to take a more altruistic approach, where you put aside your own desires to help others. You won't be raising your profile online, and you might not be making money, and you probably won't even get those feel-good chemicals released into your brain. But you will help people with your time and money in a way that might last.
The apology video, a rite of passage for almost every influencer with a decent following. For people like you and me, public cancellation is usually nothing but a short-lived spectacle. but for an influencer, it's an occupational hazard with potentially disastrous results. Being caught up in public shaming or humiliation, warranted or not, has become a career milestone for those making their life a never-ending public extravaganza. So if you want to be a social media sensation, you have to prepare for it. This is how to apologize like an influencer. But before you apologize, you first have to find something scandalous to do. Maybe it's sharing videos of a deceased person on your live stream, or locking all your content behind a paywall and gaslighting fans who can't afford yet another subscription. A big thing to worry about here isn't committing a crime, or at least one that can be proven in court, because you can't apologize from prison. It doesn't fit the aesthetic, I'm afraid. Once you have the right scandal and you're receiving backlash from all your haters, because, of course, anyone who dares to criticize you must be a hater and has absolutely nothing of value to say, it's time to drop that banger apology video. To create this, you must first understand why it's so important. After all, so many Hollywood stars have done more heinous things and they've never felt the need to apologize. I'm looking at you, Mark Wahlberg and Mike Tyson. So why is it different for the influencer? As an influencer, your job is to share your life online. Whether you're producing makeup tutorials or gaming guides, your personality is at the core of what you're selling. You're creating a parasocial relationship with your audience. This isn't really something you can control, it's pretty much part of the job. No matter how many boundaries you set up, your truest fans will become personally attached to you, no matter the kind of content you make. Think about it, you're with them when they're eating dinner or folding laundry and they watch you when they feel lonely. Of course they're going to develop a parasocial relationship and think of you as their friend. This is the main difference between influencers and what we would consider to be more traditional stars. These are the people who have always been unreachable. You generally only see them when they're doing what they're famous for, whether starring in a movie or performing their hit song. With influencers, you see even the most mundane things they do, which makes the bond between creator and audience closer and deeper. But this relationship is bound to get messy because we're all humans, and humans are flawed. As an influencer, though, you're placed on a pedestal because of the highlights of your life that you've decided to share. And so when you do something that contradicts the audience's perception of you, however big or small the offense, those people will ensure you're aware of it. And just like a real friendship, you must come forward to explain yourself. Why did you mock that corpse in your travel vlog? Did you knowingly sell contaminated lipstick, racist photos or homophobic tweets from your past, animal mistreatment, being rude at the drive-thru, being caught using a slur? Angry mobs will prepare their hot takes and trolls will storm YouTube comments. Death threats ensue and doxing and harassment will follow you like a black cloud. Your biggest fans will try to defend you, but only on one condition: apologize. In this position, you must say something, and if you don't, the public will fill your silence with outrageous takes. So you do what you must. You decide to make your apology content. I call it content because essentially that's what it's become. A new niche with a style cultivated over the years to get the most favorable reaction. First, we have the classic Apple Notes app apology commonly found on Twitter or Instagram stories. An influencer will type and format their statement and then post it all over their social media. This is a great example of what not to do. It's a classic mistake, but the Notes app apology makes it seem like you're trying to get off easy. You'll issue your regrets and hope the news cycle moves along, forgetting that anything happened. It comes off as premeditated and lacking sincerity. Here's the problem with laying it out in black and white. Now your haters can dissect every single syllable to look for hidden meanings that they definitely can 100% claim means you regret nothing and your apology is fake. It's so easy for your words to be twisted and backfire. So often the Notes app apology isn't enough. If you made the mistake of doing this, you'll soon be aware of the mistake, and after a few days of being ripped to shreds, you'll realize it's time to bring out the big guns: an apology video. The aesthetics of your video are crucial. You don't want to flash your wealth or seem too put together. Find a blank wall, like a beige or gray couch. The older and more beat up it looks, the better. If you only have expensive furniture, sitting on the floor is the best option. The framing of your video is everything. You want to seem as human and down to earth as possible. You need to wear very plain, inoffensive clothes, like a billionaire who's trying to convince the world that they're frugal. Try going without makeup, maybe greasy hair, to show that you've been really struggling the past few days. The amount of work that goes into appearing genuine is super ironic, yet here you are on your floor about to hit record. With the red light blinking, start the video with a sigh, because a sigh indicates a release of pent-up emotion. You're about to get something off your chest, maybe you don't know where to start and admit this. Whatever it takes to make you seem more relatable. You must make yourself seem worthy of respect and forgiveness. Most apologies come straight from the heart, but not you. You're an influencer, so everything has to be scripted. So here's exactly what you say and how you say it. You start by explaining how difficult the past few days or weeks have been. You must mention that you've been getting death threats, even if it was just one person that said, "Go to hell." Talk about how these threats and all the harassment have kept you up at night, questioning the safety of your friends and family. People don't have much regard for you right now, so bringing up the safety of your friends and family is important, so people feel empathy for you. Even better, they might pity you a little bit. Also, by bringing up the intensity of the hate you've been receiving, you subtly shift blame. You paint yourself as a victim, and you can even shed a tear to sell it. Yes, it's true that the amount of hate and death threats received online in circumstances like these is often uncalled for. It's also true that this public backlash can be extremely hurtful and detrimental to an influencer's mental health. But in the context of an apology, drawing too much attention to how you feel you've been treated doesn't work to make you look sorry. Anyway, you jump into your side of the story, and depending on the situation, maybe you explain that it was all supposed to be a joke. Or you didn't exactly know how your product was being produced, or the way it was filmed made the whole situation look worse. While all of this might be true, these nuggets of context somehow make you seem guiltier. They present subtle tactics to shift the blame and ignore the gravity of the situation. There's also the approach of being overly vague. You could make a short, sweet video acknowledging your role in the situation and ending it with a simple sorry. But that's not good enough either. How are the fans supposed to know you understood what you did wrong? It seems you don't care enough to go into specifics and truly immerse yourself in your own guilt. But if you go too deep into the details and create an hour-long video, your apology is buried in your rambling, and maybe you can use this as an opportunity to include ad breaks. After all, this will be probably your best performing 20 minutes of all time, so why not use it to make a little extra money? The end of the apology is always a promise to do better in the future. You understand you're accountable to your fans and that this behavior was unacceptable and that in the future nothing like this will ever happen again. You try to be as sincere as possible, that you've learned your lesson and have been adequately punished. Although you admit you don't deserve forgiveness, you hope your audience can trust you again, and then, and only then, you stop recording. No matter what you say or do, your efforts won't be taken well. If you want to apologize like an influencer, be prepared to face scrutiny, because you are bound to fail, and I can't even point to an example of an influencer apology that was well received with little backlash. So what can we learn from influencers' mistakes? Suppose you ever need to apologize to an individual or even a community. In that case, being as straightforward as possible about your indiscretions is essential. Take full responsibility for your actions without shifting blame or drawing any attention to how you've been treated. Also, when possible, apologize in private instead of presenting everything to a global audience. The smaller the conversation, the more likely everyone will have their side heard. Also, don't engage with the angry internet mob. And as a fan, try not to add fuel to the fire. It's not productive and only serves to hurt people and distract from any real mistakes an influencer has made. Although hurtful words might buzz around online, participating in the discourse will only make things worse for yourself, whether you're a fan or influencer. Influencers can sometimes provoke their fans, thinking they're defending themselves. In times of heated arguments online, I'd say log off for your own good. Take time to gather your thoughts, try to avoid sites online that will hurt you or distract you from the facts of the situation, and most importantly, go outside, touch some grass. I wonder if there are any ways for influencers to become better at apologies. When I think of creative ways some influencers have approached apologies, they only come off as cringe-inducing and even more insincere. I just don't think the internet is an ideal forum to apologize, yet I also don't see any other way. Until somebody breaks the mold, the typical apology video will continue. In the end, I don't think influencers should be held to a different standard than you and me. Like everyone else, they deserve grace in times of distress and the opportunity to right their wrongs. And that's why, in my opinion, the best apology isn't about the aesthetics, the script, or whether or not you can play a ukulele. The best apology is always changed behavior. And perhaps a video proving it. Hey, If you like the videos we make and would want to support us to make bigger and better projects, we've recently just updated the Patreon. We have different tiers with perks like access to a private Discord server, a peek behind the curtains to hear from the team that makes these videos, discounts on all the merch we'll create in the future, and many more perks that will be decided by you guys, the patrons. If you don't have the means, then please don't feel obligated in any way. Subscribing and watching these videos is more than enough support, but if you do have the means and want to support in some way, then this is the best way to do so. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching. What toys did you play with as a kid? For many who watch this channel, I'm sure the answer could be action figures, maybe a superhero you loved from that cartoon you watched. As kids, we don't think much about the media we consume or the toys we play with, we just play with them. We make up stories and run around the house in the pretend worlds we've created out of our imagination. But the truth is, even if we aren't aware of it, the things we constantly interact with at that age shape who we become and how we see ourselves as adults. In the summer of 2023, the movie Barbie premiered on the big screen, and people, mainly women, were given the opportunity to think more critically about how harmless dolls they played with as kids may have impacted their long-held beliefs about who they are and what they can be. This conversation around body image has been typically focused on girls and women. In the past, there's been lawsuits against companies like Victoria's Secret and Lululemon for their unrealistic portrayal of women's bodies. The Barbie movie showed young girls that they can be whoever they want. Unfortunately, while we've worked hard to fix the Barbies, we haven't done much with action figures. It's time we start to consider how a young boy or girl might look at the muscles and image of strength in these toys and inherit a slightly different lifelong expectation. Our world tells all kids, boys and girls, what the ideal body should look like. For young boys, it often looks like Captain America and Superman, muscular, broad, tall, and strong. Even Halloween costumes for kids have padding to make a six-pack. And body image pressure has become far worse in the age of social media. With every influencer posting their flexed and edited photos, young people are constantly bombarded with unrealistic body standards. Then, when they get in the gym for a few months and don't see the same results as their influencer, they take steroids, swapping short-term validation from strangers on the internet for potential long-term health issues. So how did we get here? In the past few decades, society has seen a shift in masculine culture. Terms like metrosexual, once used to describe men who had a skincare routine and owned designer jeans, have faded away now that most men have taken an interest in those things. The provider narrative that was the dominant role of masculinity throughout the 20th century isn't realistic anymore. Part of this is practical since it's almost impossible to survive in a one-income household in many parts of Northern America and Europe. And part of it is cultural. Women want to work and pursue career goals outside the home, and as a result, traditional family roles shifted. For some men, the role of the protector is the only remaining definition of masculinity they can count on. Physical superiority is a crucial factor in that equation, but physical superiority isn't about just having strength. It's a lot about looking the part. That's why physical fitness was a massive part of Nazi Germany's youth program. It wasn't enough to be strong or tough, you had to look the part to exemplify what the Nazis thought was the superior race. This sentiment has been echoed throughout history to varying degrees. Society has always equated physical weakness in men to worthlessness. It's why videos of men cutting logs in the forest garner millions of views on TikTok. Being strong is attractive. The problem with that is that there's really no end. The goalposts of what looks good and what's big enough continue to shift. Even in the bodybuilding community, this is an issue. Arnold Schwarzenegger was once considered to have the best body in bodybuilding, but if he stood by some of the guys who compete today, he'd look pretty small in comparison. This is what leads to body dysmorphia, a disorder where you're never really satisfied with how you look, no matter how hard you work or how good everyone else tells you you look. Traditionally, body dysmorphia was associated with girls. Girls today are taught about anorexia and other eating disorders in middle school health classes. They're reminded that female bodies in advertisements are typically photoshopped and not to compare themselves with the Kardashians. But now we're seeing a surge of men dealing with their own breed of body image issues. For boys today, this commonly looks like muscle dysmorphia, a preoccupation with having a muscular, lean physique. In 2023, YouTuber Will Tennyson made a video about body dysmorphia, interviewing dozens of people on the streets. During his interview, almost every single person had something they wanted to change about themselves. even the people who already fit the conventional definition of attractiveness. 1/4 of boys and young men engage in some sort of muscle-building behavior. This is perfectly fine, in fact, I encourage it. Going to the gym has been a sort of therapy for me, and when I go there, I can turn the world off for an hour or two and just focus on pushing the weight. Going to the gym regularly also teaches discipline, hard work, consistency, and perseverance, all of which can help in every area of your life. And that's not to mention the obvious health benefits of exercise. I go to the gym regularly, so I don't want you to think of this video as me advocating for people to stop trying to build their dream physique or even worse, not exercise. Not at all. All I am saying is that we need to have some discussion about how much is too much. When does something healthy become unhealthy? A report from the Center for Countering Digital Hate, a technology watchdog group, found that social media users in the US between the ages of 14 and 18 have viewed videos with hashtags related to steroids up to 420 million times in the last 3 years alone. These are kids that haven't really finished puberty yet, being exposed to such harmful substances. These videos also have hashtags like #TeenFitness and #TeenBodybuilding. They feature people with large muscles and generally unrealistic natural bodies. They promote steroid-like substances and other supplements that claim to give you these unrealistic muscles, all while downplaying the genuine health risks and side effects, and convincing teens to conceal their supplements from their parents. Steroids are a man-made version of hormones normally produced by the adrenal gland. Their use can lead to heart disease, kidney problems, and liver damage. They come with the risk of stroke, heart palpitations, and high blood pressure. Unregulated protein powders or supplements might be altered with powerful stimulants or even include some dangerous anabolic steroids. Even in the safest scenario, too much protein can lead to intestinal issues or kidney injury, forcing the kidneys to work overtime and to filter out excessive protein. And beyond supplements, going on an extreme diet to try and bulk up and acquire this unattainable physique comes with its own risk. The popular bulk and cut regimen, which involves long periods of rapid weight gain, followed by periods of calorie restriction, can affect long-term muscle and bone development. This doesn't even consider the psychological fallout that young people can experience on this dangerous journey. Depression and suicidal thoughts are more common in people who are malnourished, which can occur when cutting calories or neglecting food groups. Unsurprisingly, eating raw liver day in and day out isn't going to make you feel that great. And the depression is fed by the body insecurity that so many young people have, specifically young men who feel like they need to achieve some peak physical strength to be worthy. Now, content creators talking about their steroid use is terrible, but there is something worse.
Are you natural? Oh, I knew I got to them. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Fake natties. For the uninitiated, a fake natty in the bodybuilding community is somebody who lies about their steroid use. It's worse for young people because it creates an unattainable goal for young men, turning them into Sisyphus, forced to push a boulder up a hill every day for a body they can just never get. The whole of Hollywood is just one big fake natty industry. Whenever an actor is asked how he got a magical body for a movie role, his reply is always the same: I trained hard and ate right. While those two things aren't indeed true, they usually forget to mention how many drugs they had to take to build that amount of muscle in such a short period. Then, when a young man watches his favorite actor transform their body in 6 months, he joins a gym hoping to do the same, only to feel terrible when it's been a year and he hasn't seen nearly as much growth as the actor. Then dissatisfaction starts to build up and body dysmorphia sets in. Nowhere is this kind of influence more upsetting than in the story of influencer Brian Johnson, more commonly known as Liver King. He rose to popularity on social media by eating raw liver, insisting that this primitive, inspired lifestyle was the reason for his larger-than-life muscles. He also made millions of dollars off his audience by selling them supplements, but it was later discovered that the real secret to his body wasn't his primal habits, but steroids, and lots of them. Think about the thousands of people who followed his methods and worked hard in the gym only to end up feeling worse about themselves than when they started. And that's what Natty or Not does. It helps to expose the frauds and helps teach young people what an attainable physique looks like. Thankfully, there are more and more people in the fitness industry, like Noel Diesel, Greg Doucette, and Eddie Abu, are opening up about their steroid use and advocating against it, though their methods and science can be questionable at times. If you're a young man listening to me right now and you're thinking about joining a gym or have joined one, congratulations, I think you've made the right choice. I encourage you do it for the right reasons though. Not because you want to look like an influencer or you think it'll impress the ladies. Because trust me, it really won't. If anything, you'll be getting compliments from guys more than anyone else. Muscles don't lead to wealth or success, they won't make you a better person. You do still have to do all of that work yourself. Going to the gym won't make your life automatically fall into place. And don't ever compare yourself to the people you see on the internet, because you'll really never know if they're natty or not. What more can we say? The internet was already dying, but artificial intelligence quickened its death and put the nail in its coffin.
As of 2019, 96% of deepfakes on the internet were sexual in nature, and virtually all of those were of non-consenting women. With the release of AI tools like DALL-E and Midjourney, making these deepfakes has become easier than ever before, and the repercussions for the women involved are much more devastating. Recently, a teacher in a small town in the United States was fired after her likeness appeared in an adult video. Parents of the students found the video and made it clear they didn't want this woman teaching their kids. She was immediately dismissed from her position. But this woman never actually filmed an explicit video. Generative AI created a likeness of her and deepfaked it onto the body of an adult film actress. She pleaded her innocence, but the parents of the students couldn't wrap their heads around how a video like this could be faked. They refused to believe her. And honestly, it's hard to blame them. We've all seen just how good generative AI can be. This incident, and many others just like it, prove how dangerous AI adult content is, and if left unchecked, it could be so much worse. At first glance, AI pornography might seem harmless. If we can generate other forms of content without human actors, why not this one? Surely it may reduce work in the field, but it could also curb more problematic issues in the industry. If the AI was used to create artificial people, it wouldn't be so bad, but the problem is that the generative AI has been mainly used with deepfakes to convince viewers that the person they're watching is a specific, real person, someone who never consented to be in the video. Speaking of consent, by convincingly portraying women in suggestive situations, the perpetrators commit sexual acts or behaviors without the victim's permission, and that, by definition, is sexual assault. But does using generative AI to produce these videos cause any actual harm beyond being defined as assault? For the victims involved, there are numerous consequences to being portrayed in these videos.
This is what it looks like to see yourself naked against your will being spread all over the internet.
QTC Cinderella is a Twitch streamer who built a massive following for her gaming, baking, and lifestyle content. She also created the Streamer Awards to honor her fellow content creators, one of whom was Brandon Ewing, aka Atrioc. In January of 2023, Atrioc was live streaming when his viewers saw a tab open on his browser for a deepfake website. After getting screenshotted and posted on Reddit, users found that the site address featured deepfakes videos of streamers like QTC Cinderella doing explicit sexual acts. Cinderella began getting harassed by these images and videos, and after seeing them she said, "The amount of body dysmorphia I've experienced seeing those photos has ruined me. It's not as simple as just being violated, it's so much more than that." For months afterwards, QTC Cinderella was constantly harassed with these reminders of these images and videos. Some horrible people sent the photos to her 17-year-old cousin. And this isn't a one-off case. Perpetrators of deepfakes are known to send these videos to family members of the victims, especially if they don't like what the victim is doing publicly. The founder of Not Your Porn, a group dedicated to removing non-consensual porn from the internet, was targeted by internet trolls using AI-generated videos depicting her in explicit acts. Then somebody sent these videos to her family members. Just imagine how terrible that must feel for her and her relatives. The sad truth is that even when a victim can discredit the videos, the harm might already be done. A deepfake can hurt someone's career at a pivotal moment. Cinderella was able to get back on her feet and retain her following, but the school teacher, who lost her livelihood, wasn't so lucky. Imagine someone running for office and leading in the polls only to be targeted with a deepfake video 24 hours before election night. Imagine how much damage could be done before their team could prove that the video was doctored. Unfortunately, there's very little legislation on deepfakes, and so far only 3 states in the US have passed laws to address them directly. Even with these laws, the technology makes it difficult to track down the people who create them. Also, because most of them post on their personal websites rather than social media, there's no regulations or content moderation limits on what they can share. Since tracking and prosecuting the individuals who make this kind of content is so challenging, the onus should be on the companies that make these tools to prevent them from being used for evil. And in fairness, some of them are trying. Platforms like DALL-E and Midjourney have taken steps to prevent people from creating the likeness of a living person. Reddit is also working to improve its AI detection system and has already made considerable strides in prohibiting this content on its platform. These efforts are important, but I'm not sure they'll completely eliminate the threat of deepfakes. More generative AI tools are coming on the scene and will require new moderation efforts, and eventually some of these platforms won't care, especially if that gives them an edge over well-established platforms. And then there's the sheer influx of uploaded content. In 2022, Pornhub received over 2 million video uploads to its site. That number will likely increase with new AI tools that can generate content without needing a physical camera. How can any moderation system keep up with that insane volume? The worst thing about these deepfakes is that the victims can't just log off of the internet either. Almost all of our livelihoods depend on the internet, so logging off would be an enormous disadvantage in their careers and personal life. And expecting anyone to leave the internet to protect themselves isn't a reasonable ask. The onus isn't on the victim to change, it's on the platforms and the government to create tools that prevent these things from happening so easily. If all the women who are being harassed went offline, the trolls would win, and this tactic of theirs would be incredibly successful. They could effectively silence critics and whoever they felt like attacking. There's another problem with generative AI tools producing so much adult content. It introduces strong biases to the algorithms and how women should be presented. Many women have reported that they're often over-sexualized when they try to create an image of themselves using AI tools. These biases are introduced by the source of the AI's training data, the internet. Although nudes and explicit images have been filtered out for some generative AI platforms, these biases still persist. These platforms have to do more than just let the open internet train their AI if they want to prevent the overt sexualization of women to be their normal output. Deepfakes may be making headlines now, but the truth is they've been around in spirit for a very long time. Before generative AI, people used tools like Photoshop and video editing software to superimpose celebrities' heads on the bodies of adult film actors. Broadly, these doctored videos weren't compelling, but the things are now very different with AI. We're careening dangerously close to a point where we can no longer discern the real from the fake. French postmodern philosopher Baudrillard warned of a moment when we can no longer distinguish between reality and a simulation. Humans use technology to navigate a complex reality. We invented maps to guide us through an intricate mass of land. Eventually, we created mass media to understand the world around us and help simplify its complexity. But there will be a point where we lose track of reality, a point when we're spending more time looking at a simulation of the world on our phone than we will be participating in the real world around us, and we're almost there now. With generative AI, our connection to reality is even further disconnected. Because technology can convincingly replicate reality on our devices, we're less inclined to go outside and see what's real for ourselves. This inability of human consciousness is to distinguish what is real and what is simulation is what Baudrillard called hyperreality, a state that leaves us vulnerable to malicious manipulation, from things like deepfakes to people getting fired to propaganda leading to the loss of millions of lives. You might remember that a couple of years ago there were numerous PSAs, often from celebrities, warning us to keep an eye out for deepfakes. They were annoying, but ultimately, they succeeded in making the public hyper-aware of fake videos. But not so much with the deepfake adult content. Maybe it's because the PSAs about deepfakes didn't mention pornography, they addressed fake speeches by presidents and famous people instead. Or maybe it's because those who consume this content don't care whether it's real or fake. They're okay with the illusion. One thing is true though, if the general public was trained to recognize deepfake pornography, the potential for harm would be limited. By being more critical as information consumers and reporting these harmful videos when we see them, we might be able to curb the effects of this dangerous new medium. It's not like we're strangers to being critical of what we see and read online. When Wikipedia was first introduced, the idea that it could be a legitimate source of information was laughable. It was mocked on sitcoms and late-night television. It symbolized the absurdity of believing what you read on the internet. That perception changed with time, deservedly so for Wikipedia, but we had a healthy skepticism towards user-generated internet platforms for a while. The question is, can we be critical and discerning towards deepfakes while acknowledging that some content is real? Will we lose track of what's simulation and what's reality and just distrust whatever we see online? Or worse, will manipulators succeed in making deepfake-inflicted suffering an everyday occurrence, and we end up accepting that as the cost of existing online? And is there any hope of regulation stopping the constant assault of generative AI on our well-being? One thing's become clear since ChatGPT and DALL-E started making headlines last year, and it's that AI will inevitably replace a lot of what humans currently do. It can already convincingly replicate human communication and human design, and our inability to distinguish between human output and AI output has created a laundry list of problems that will be challenging to address. Already, businesses are using ChatGPT's writing capabilities in their marketing and sales departments, It's even possible that we'll be watching AI-written TV shows soon. For writers, that's your dream job and your day job both vanishing overnight. And then there will be all the opportunities for deception using AI, like imagine what phishing scams there'll be in a year when scammers can easily fabricate videos and audio of anyone you know. People with ill intent can create content to cause others real harm, and right now that's AI-generated adult videos inflicting pain against women. If we're unable to tell what's real and what's an AI-generated fake, humanity has a tough road ahead, and I'm not sure any of us are ready for it.
The internet is dead and we are the killers. Truth doesn't really exist online anymore. Bots have swamped social media with misinformation, and the web pages we surf today are almost entirely generated by AI. Even YouTube is flooded with channels completely run by AI with zero creative input from humans. Every single day, less and less of the content we consume is created by humans, and what's even worse is that all of it is being recycled back into a system that we have very little control over, leaving the internet a shell of what it once was. Scrolling through social media has become an isolated, empty, and fruitless activity. But how exactly did we get here, and is it too late to revive it? The internet started as a weapon of war, not an explicit military war, but a technological battle during the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union. This pushed American researchers to develop a way of sharing data and programs through a global dispersed network beginning in the early 1960s. The earliest version of the internet created between two universities, the University of California and Stanford. Simple messages could be communicated between them, but it was nothing like what we have today. Throughout the 1970s, though, that network continued spreading via the use of phone lines. In 1983, there were only 500 computer hosts connected. Within 5 years, that reached 100,000, rolling out to increasingly more countries. Then, everything changed with the creation of the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web was a simple concept. It was a network of hypertext documents accessed with a program called a browser. By the mid-1990s, it had moved from scientists and governments into the realm of public consumption. The birth of the internet was celebrated as a revolutionary force. With the free transfer and democracy of information, power could be put back in the hands of the people. The borders of regulation and nationalism would be transcended, creating a new age of society. You no longer needed a media or a political platform to air your views. Everyone could become their own publisher, something that wasn't possible before. There was only one problem: greed. As years turned to decades, the internet followed a familiar path, the same one almost every other important technological innovation did before and will keep doing. Dozens of internet service providers had emerged, but they slowly began merging into just a few big companies, leaving consumers with no real choice. Just like with radio a century earlier, thousands of different companies were slowly bought or priced out of the market. This was true for both the infrastructure and the web real estate. By 2001, when the dot-com bubble popped, the top 10 websites made up 31% of page views in the United States. And by 2006, that number climbed to 40% and then 75% in 2010. At the same time, iPhones and smart devices changed our relationship with the internet. Browsing the World Wide Web became less common as people shifted to semi-closed applications, and in 2010, these applications accounted for less than a quarter of internet traffic. Today, it's 90%. Keeping users inside the confines of applications made advertising more effective. Having created an entirely new ecosystem, Apple was on its way to becoming one of the biggest companies in the world thanks to this closed system. After the dot-com bubble popped, only 5 tech companies were able to survive and thrive: Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. The big 5 are now virtually impossible to avoid on the internet, whether through advertising, e-commerce, or the cloud computing hosts that websites depend on. This tech dominance has permanently changed our society, and as these industry giants compete in a technological arms race for the next big weapon to sell consumers, that being artificial intelligence, the last vestiges of a utopian internet could be lost: connection and truth. Nearly 5.5 billion people have access to the internet, and the average user spends 6 hours a day online. It's by far the world's biggest market, and unfortunately, the most valuable commodity in that market is your attention. Views, likes, and reviews are worth their weight in gold, and this has led to a huge shady marketplace for all kinds of engagement. Money has turned the internet into a tiered system, ripe for exploitation. Creating a successful channel or social media profile can be a lucrative long-term investment,
With a few clicks and dollars, anyone can buy thousands of Spotify streams, Instagram likes, or YouTube views. How can companies offer these services? Well, employing thousands of people to click on posts manually would be far too expensive. Instead, they use bots, automated, unattended software. When set on a target, they artificially engage with the post, boost it in the rankings, and attract more attention. Websites do their best to scrub bots out, but it's almost impossible to remove them all. Over the last 6 years, Meta deactivated over 27 billion fake accounts. Some believe it's already too late to take action against bots. They think we may have reached a dark tipping point. First posted in 2019, the Dead Internet Theory proposes that we're living in a dystopian ghost town populated by simulated actors. According to the theory, something changed around 2016. The internet had become so saturated by automated content that having a genuine human-to-human interaction was rare, if not impossible. Surfing the web was like driving alone and only passing automated vehicles on the road. The theory's original poster admitted that it sounded conspiratorial, but they were certain of a feeling that something was distinctly lacking. There was an emptiness online that hadn't been there in the early 2000s. Images, conversations, and memes all began to resemble one another, while forums that were once exciting now felt sanitized. This was all supposedly all carefully curated to keep control of culture and political power, and most of all, to make sure that the general population stays in line. The Dead Internet Theory remained on the fringes until 2022, when a grand unveiling brought the issue of bots to global attention. On November 30th, 2022, the world was introduced to ChatGPT. Built on a large language model that processes gigantic datasets and forms relationships between ideas, it is the most advanced form of artificial intelligence ever to exist. For decades, computers have been much more powerful than humans at specific tasks, like chess or mathematical calculation. The question that divided computer scientists and philosophers was whether or not computers could ever transition into a kind of general intelligence. Mathematician Alan Turing asked this question in 1950. He developed the Turing test as a way to determine whether a machine was thinking. The test was simple. For a computer to pass, it has to fool a human into thinking they're talking with another human. Last year, ChatGPT-4 became one of the first to pass the Turing test. We had officially brought a machine to life, and suddenly the Dead Internet Theory became not just a conspiracy, but a likely future. And if we can't distinguish between humans and AI anymore, who can we trust? Consider this. 49.6% of all internet traffic in 2023 came from bots. Even more daunting is that things are likely to get much worse. Now that search engines have started to integrate AI technology like ChatGPT into their services, the flaws have never been more clear. Tech giants are rushing products to the market to compete with each other for supremacy. In the process, there have been some disastrous results. Google's entry into the world of AI, Gemini, told users that rocks are a source of vitamins. Astronauts who landed on the moon encountered cats. Backpacks are just as effective as parachutes when jumping out of a plane. These tech-fueled hallucinations come from them trying to piece together gigantic amounts of information that have been compressed, and they do this with an algorithm that identifies the important components and interpolates the missing pieces. Anything creative is usually generated using a composition or altered version of work that has already been created by humans. Artwork and music online are being used as training data for artificial intelligence, leading to many arguing that workers are being exploited. Hundreds of artists backed by the nonprofit Artists' Rights Alliance have signed an open letter seeking to prevent AI from sabotaging and undermining artists. On top of that, these models don't know how to judge whether or not a source is trustworthy. Instead, they gravitate towards popular responses, which can range from reliable academic journals to a meme made by a 17-year-old to gain Reddit karma. One individual created a fake website designed purely to trap crawlers. These are automated programs commonly used by search engines to systematically download the contents of web pages. They realized that the GPT bot was collecting around 3 million pages from their sites every day. This was a small window into the quality of data that is being scraped by chatbot AIs and forming their responses, which isn't exactly a positive sign. What's even worse is that because so much of the internet is already generative AI, the next generation of AI will use content created by the previous generations as training datasets, and with each passing generation, the work these AI tools produce will continue to be less and less human. Search results will be filled with AI-generated content, and finding trustworthy sources will become even more difficult. The word robot was first used in a 1920 Czech science fiction play called Rossum's Universal Robot. The It comes from the Czech word robota, which loosely translates to slave. This was a good description of mechanical robots used in production. They were simply tools like a hammer or a calculator. As robots moved into the digital world, though, the relationship between master and slave has been blurred. Online media is already largely controlled by artificial intelligence. Powerful automated programs determine whether content succeeds or fails. Advertisers pay millions for professionals to crack the code of mysterious algorithms. Because they're constantly changing, these programs essentially create a secretive inner functionality process not even known to those who design it. Left at the mercy of pattern recognizing supercomputers, our behavior has been shaped around them. Social media sites have shifted from authentic social engagement to prioritizing consumption-driven models. As long as they can keep you online, it's good for business. While there, algorithms process unimaginably large datasets to create profiles of you as a consumer, categorizing your online behavior to create personalized ads. All it takes is a single click to fill your feed with a certain subject, pulling you in to consume more. The system rewards copycats and imitators who observe successful content, and they have no choice. To survive, online creators, influencers, and marketers must constantly seek the algorithm's approval. In the end, even the humans who create are forced to create generic, unoriginal content. And there's a reason people are complaining about the Mr. Beastification of YouTube. But who can you blame? When a creator feels like the only way they can succeed is to appease the almighty algorithm and they see how well Jimmy Donaldson does that, why shouldn't they copy him? As Friedrich Nietzsche argued, people tend to follow the herd for protection, afraid to show authenticity and confront truth. With this comes nihilism, where the herd drifts aimlessly without meaning or certainty. That is reflected in the algorithm. The content we consume and perpetuate leaves us in an infinite cycle of emptiness. Our aesthetics and values are now curated by non-human forces. So is our culture still ours? Are humans the ones giving the orders, or has technology become our master? The commercialization of the internet, the concentration of a handful of companies, and the creation of a quick but dangerously inaccurate generative tool have given us a technology that is manipulating our deepest weaknesses. The emergence of bot armies offers a shortcut for business development. AI offers a shortcut to creativity for low-quality content production. Powerful algorithms have fueled our addiction to short-form content. Has the internet become a carefully constructed reality we've all been presented with? Not to the extent that the dead internet theory describes, but as artificial intelligence spreads through the internet, our sense of reality is being seriously shaken. It's a wake-up call to change course before it's too late. To keep the internet alive, we need the courage to break away from the herd, acknowledge that the current systems aren't working, and that humanity is more important than profit.
If you like the videos we make and would love to support us to make bigger and better projects, we just updated the Patreon. Everyone who joins will get free access to our updated Discord server, where you can connect with the Aperture community. Patrons can choose from different tiers with perks like discounts on all the merch we have and will create in the future, private Discord channels for voting power on video topics and idea pitching, shoutouts in video descriptions, and more perks to come that will be decided by you guys, the patrons. If you don't have the means, then please don't feel obligated in any way. Subscribing and watching the videos is more than enough support. But if you do have the means and want to support, then Patreon is the best way to do so. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching.
The internet was humanity's worst mistake. Everything from the tech it's built on to the companies that run the biggest platforms, influencers who have made it their jobs to mislead the public, and of course, artificial intelligence. Without a shadow of a doubt, the internet has done a lot of good for humanity, but perhaps it has done more harm than good, and resulted in a net negative for the world. To understand just how terrible the internet is, we need to start by talking about the foundation on which it's built.
The year is 1665, and Isaac Newton is looking out his window at an apple tree standing